Attend, O reader, our tale of wonder. Welcome back to Paper Cuts, everyone, where this week, by author permission, we are going to be reading Wearing the Cape by Marion Harmon. It's a really delightful tale of a young girl suddenly finding that she has developed superpowers in a world where there is an entire industry revolving around those people who happen to be enhanced from the human baseline. And it really throws a wrench in her whole everything, mostly her college plans. And we'll learn plenty about her as we read here. So let's just dive right in, shall we? And get started. Right after I fix my settings, apparently. Okay, let's get started with chapter 1. I was driving east on the Eisenhower Expressway when the tea-time anarchist dropped the Ashland Avenue overpass on top of me, using enough C4 to bring the whole southbound span down at once. My day had started normally enough. I gulped coffee, grabbed scorched toast, exchanging kisses with Mom on the way out of the door. The September chill nipped around the edges of my coat and at my legs, making me glad I'd worn tights under my skirt. Driving one-handed, I scanned my schedule with the other. I'd be playing Mom's Girl Friday at the gallery, getting ready for Thursday night's foundation event. Julie had texted. She planned for us to take the University of Chicago by storm our first year and wanted us ready by orientation week. We'd ruled Oak Park High till graduation, and she didn't see any reason our college years should be any different. I passed a gray Suburban with a red-headed munchkin in the back seat, and she waved at me while her mom talked business on her hands-free cell. I stuck out my tongue, making her laugh, and my pad launched into Julie's new call theme, the UFC fight song. I actually don't know the UFC fight song. One sec, I'm gonna look that up. I mean, it's ostensibly does not matter that I get the first four notes of this right, but UFC fight song. Do I know this? I'm gonna mute my mic in case this is copyrighted, actually. I don't know that. But, wave the flag of old Chicago, and then bang! Overhead explosions shattered my thoughts, and I looked up to see blooms of blasted concrete and falling bridge. I screamed and ducked, lost control. The car slid, a flash of yellow, and I hit something hard. I screamed again at the second world-ending shock as falling roadway flattened my car. The tires blew, the buckled roof hit my head, and flying glass stung my face as my vision exploded in fireworks. Choking off the scream, I found myself lying, stretched across the front seat, the gear shift digging into my stomach in smothering darkness. I tasted blood on my tongue. Alive. I was alive. The car roof pushed down, inches above my head as I lay there in the dark, my seatbelt cutting off my air. Lightheaded, clawing blindly, I unbuckled, but still couldn't breathe without choking. Cement dust. Pulling my coat open, I yanked my sweater up, taking shallow, sobbing breaths through the wool, and fighting to think around the rising fear. Twisting around, I felt my legs and wiggled my toes. Nothing broken? An emergency kit under the seat. There was a pen light. I almost wept with relief. A broken e-pad, damn it. Still, breathing okay, not bleeding out. Help. Help would come. But would it come in time? What about the Munchkin and her mom? Were they under the road now? Could they wait if they were alive? I choked on panic as thick as the dust. I had to get out. I had to know. They had to be alive. Gasping, pulse pounding, I pushed against the roof above me and felt something deep inside me change. Cold fire ran through my bones. I shrieked, and my next breath filled me with the whole world. Tearing through the crushed roof of my car, I heaved aside the chunk of roadway above my head as easily as clearing cheap drywall. I stood, blinking at the disaster around me, and saw what had saved me. I slid into a huge earth-moving machine traveling in the next lane, and it shielded me. Around us, cars had fallen with a span and lay broken among shattered chunks of road and twisted steel frame. Dust-clogged air carried the smell of spilled oil and gas, the first bite of burning rubber. A white sedan screeched to a sliding stop at the north end of the broken bridge. The world went far, far away as I looked at my shaking hands, unable to believe what I had just done. Oh, God. Oh, God. I pushed the screaming panic down. Okay, deal now, freak later. I started digging. I started in behind the earth mover, pushing broken roadway back as easily as wading into fallen leaves till I found the Munchkins' car. They were there, but not alive, and I crawled out of the hole before vomiting into the dust. After that, I focused on what I could do, scrambling over the shattered chunks of road to check passengers in the cars that had fallen between the wrecked spans. I ripped open one crumpled family van to gently remove a baby seat and its wailing occupant. Then I dug for more buried victims. Wherever there were cracks in the fallen overpass, I could actually see their body heat, hear them breathing, crying, screaming. I worked hard to ignore the awful details, tossing concrete slabs aside and pulling out anyone I thought I could move safely. A few I didn't do more than quickly examine. Very quickly. News footage of disasters and battles hadn't prepared me for an up-close view of what tons of falling concrete could do to flesh and bone, and I tried not to think. I barely heard the wailing sirens and the air-beating percussion of the police and news helicopters. Only when the capes arrived, moving me out of the way to get to work themselves, did I begin to take stock of myself. I hadn't broken a single nail, but cement dust and splattered engine oil covered my coat, my hair, my face, mixed all into a black grime. My tights were in no better shape, and my boots, they weren't touching the ground. The concrete slab I'd been standing on had shifted lower while I took stock, but I hadn't. I stood a few inches above the unstable surface. I looked around, carefully, stepping down. Nobody seemed to notice. Breakthrough? I thought. I'm a breakthrough. I realized I was laughing like a loon and cut it off quick. Atlas found me there atop the ridge of rubble. His dirtied costume and cement-dusted hair matched mine, but he still managed to look impossibly noble. Atlas, ma'am, he said with that famous Texas drawl, as if the whole world didn't know him. I know, I mean, Hope. Hope Corrigan. His gaze sharpened as if I'd suddenly become more interesting, and he extended his hand. Will you come with me, ma'am? When I took his hand, he shifted his grip, pulling, and I followed, rising again. We've done all we can back here with muscle, he said when I looked down, and I'll be back for the cleanup, but we need to get you out of here and away from the cameras till you decide what to do. Later, I saw news footage of us, Atlas in his blue and white leather jumpsuit and cape, me an unrecognizable disaster victim flying away from the fallen span. That was certainly the last time I'd be unrecognizable. Sorry, I'm gonna be pressing a lot of buttons in the middle of the show today. I have a lot of keyboard juggling to do. Um, but yeah, what an opening chapter, right? Um, oh, before I forget, we had 2 followers between streams actually. Right after we played Balatro earlier this week, and raided into Gloop Queen, we got a couple followers from that. So welcome Gloop Queen and Mebbles to the Igloo. Very happy to have you both. Hope you enjoy the show. While I'm taking a breather to promote things, I'd like to remind everyone that I have a Discord. I know, there's a lot of Discords in the world these days, but Uh, Mine is a particularly good place to be if you like the show. We can discuss new books to read. You know, talk about what is happening in the books that we're currently reading. I post a wide variety of recipes, pictures of my sewing progress. Just a lot of this and that takes much longer to filter into the wider internet. So if you like what I do and want some more of it, uh, I would suggest the Discord. Anyway, let's resume, shall we? Where is the button I'm looking for? Oop, I already had it the other way around. Oops. Well, anyway, Chapter 2. On August 18th, for 3.2 seconds, every human being simultaneously experienced total sensory deprivation, no sight, hearing, or physical sensations. A small percentage of individuals did later claim to have heard something, what one person described as the sound of God striking a cosmic tuning fork. However, when people remember the event, what they most remember is not the sensory blackout or the worldwide power failure that came with it, but what happened next. They remember where they were when the first superhumans appeared. From Professor Charles Gibbons' book The New Heroic Age. Hand in hand, Atlas and I flew out over the loop and descended on Grant Park. I had to be the most improbable breakthrough he'd ever seen. I hadn't grown an inch since my debutante ball and was always being told I could use a milkshake. Soon to be U of C first year, I still looked, when not covered in grime, like an underdeveloped teenage Tinkerbell. Well, now I could fly like Tink, but it had nothing to do with thinking happy thoughts. I remember the event. It caught me out on the playground in the middle of a game of Red Rover. I'd been racing to break the opposite line. Falling over onto grass, I didn't even get stains, but others weren't so lucky. With no power, they closed the school and sent us all home. The blackout caught Dad on the other side of the city, restoring some old building, and he didn't make it back home till the next morning, just long enough to see us before heading back into the city to help where he could. When our power and cable came back on, we saw what was happening. The smoking craters left by planes falling from the sky that started fires across the city, car crashes spreading death on the highways. Mom turned it off, but not before we saw the footage the rest of the world saw. We watched with wide-eyed wonder a man in airport workers' coveralls leap into the sky to catch a private jet headed straight for O'Hare's tarmac. That was Atlas, aka John Chandler, 18 at the time and just a few months younger than I was now. A cowboy from Texas, working at a baggage monkey at O'Hare Airport, he was the first breakthrough caught on film and shown to the world. Others appeared in the disasters that followed the blackout, and most of them helped in any way they could, but some just added to the chaos. Like Aftershock, the sonic-powered gangbanger who turned bank robber the next day. Being 8 meant to me that a flying man catching a plane was amazing, but not impossible. The news that Air Force One had made a crater, the newly sworn-in President Kale had determined a state of emergency, didn't mean much to me at the time either. I did see the news clips of Atlas and the others who followed, later TV shows, movies, even comic books fictionalizing their adventures. We had real live superheroes now, and we gave them code names if they didn't hurry up and pick their own. And now I flew with one. The first one, even. Atlas brought us down outside the Chicago Sentinels building. It looked like a giant, half-buried baseball, and we Chicagoans called it the Dome. Sorry, agree, that's really good. Oddly enough, not one Irish rabbit takes flights into or out of O'Hare. Oh, you never know. They do let animals into the cargo hold these days. Oh, what are you thinking about that one? We landed at the Collinwood Portico on the west side, the entrance facing the August 18th memorial. This early on a cold September morning, there weren't any tourists or protesters around as we walked through the tall bronze doors into the great public atrium. I suddenly felt like the kid in braces who had come here on one of the first public tours, but then it had been an adventure. Now I so didn't want to be here. Atlas marched us across the polished flagstones to the reception desk, staffed by a colorless man in a dark suit and glasses. "Morning, Tom. This is Astra, and she'll have full guest clearance until further notice." I blinked. I had a code name already? "Ma'am," Tom replied, giving me a quick but close inspection before looking down at his screens. If he thought my disaster victim appearance at all unusual, he didn't show it. Past the reception desk at the back of the atrium, Atlas led me to an elevator bay that was all brass and glass. "Astra," I whispered, distracted from my jittering thoughts. "Where'd that come from?" "I assume this morning was your breakthrough. Do you already have a name picked out? Keep it if you like it. Astra's Latin for star, all I can think of and spur of the moment. If you decide to take up the life, well, you can pick your own." The elevator arrived, and we stepped in. "Just be careful what you choose," he added, voice dry. "I'm not so sure about Atlas." "Why?" "Well, I named myself after a Greek titan whose sole job was to stand there and hold up the big blue sky. Got so bored with it he conned Hercules into taking his place, and Hercules, hardly the sharpest crayon in the box, tricked him into taking it back. Good thing most folks don't know their mythology." "I'll be careful," I promised uncertainly, not sure if he was serious. "Where are we going?" "Our actual headquarters is downstairs. Dome itself is plenty tough, but we buried the most important stuff under enough concrete and armor to take a nuclear bomb. Some of the folks we tussled with swing some mighty serious firepower. Of course, we need to worry about A-class black hats coming around to shoot up the place, try and make a point, so we made darn sure any attack like that'll fail, and folks know it. Saves fuss and bother all around, don't you think?" I flinched away from the thought. If someone like the Tea Time Anarchist, I'd heard a reporter throwing his name at the cameras before we left the scene, thought he could blow up the dome or even seriously damage it, I shivered. Was I going into shock? Could I even go into shock with what I'd become? The doors opened into an underground lobby, all white marble and columns with smart panels and sliding doors that made it look like someone had thrown Caesar's Palace and the Enterprise into a blender. Friezes depicting the Sentinels battling supervillains decorated the walls, and despite everything, I laughed and felt a little better. I'd had a good art history teacher, and the frieze of Atlas fighting Aftershock copied the classic pose of Hercules versus the Hydra. The lobby receptionist, Bob, who looked so much like Tom I couldn't have picked them apart in a lineup, greeted us with a nod and an "Atlas? Astra?" Beyond the lobby, we went through a set of doors and down a hall, past the most high-tech gym I've ever seen, finally going through a big door labeled medical. On the other side, I found my personal nightmare, a doctor who wanted to know all about me. Apologies, we got started a little late this evening. Dinner did not have the courtesy to pay attention to the clock. Anyway, Chapter 3. Although we can measure and quantify them, we'll probably never know how Superman. Yeah, that's what I get. We're thinking about Atlas, and there's the line. I've drawn it. I've connected the two dots. Anyway. Although we can measure and quantify them, we'll probably never know how superhuman powers work. They are supernatural in the literal sense. They appear to have no cause in nature. Science's greatest minds have been wrestling with it since the event, and the best they've come up with is the statement that there's obviously an immaterial phenomenon at work that we can only observe and measure through material means. It's not the first time that this has happened, though. For example, we know how gravity acts, but we can only measure its effects, and we still don't know why mass creates gravity. Although, of course, we have some theories we like for their consistency and their elegance. Quote from Dr. Jonathan Beth on the science of superhumans. I texted Mom just in case she'd seen the news, telling her I'd skipped the gallery and wasn't feeling well. They let me shower, and as the oil, cement, dust, and blood circled down the drain, the fact I wasn't even bruised freaked me out all over again. I stayed in the shower until I stopped shaking. The cotton jumpsuit they gave me itched, and I rolled up the sleeves and legs before coming out to face Dr. Death, the fiend from hell Atlas left me with. Dr. Beth's eyes sparkled with kind humor, and he promised me a lollipop when we were through, but the sensors he stuck to my skin were chilly, aggravating my tendency to shiver. I focused on the tasks he set me to, putting a wall between me and the lab and the memories screaming behind my eyes. He tested my new strength, toughness, super senses, even my ability to fly, playing with his monitors the entire time and humming to himself when he wasn't chuckling or telling me to do something. By the time we were through, I felt like I'd rolled down a hill in a barrel of rocks and run a marathon with bricks strapped on. At least he was happy. Atlas had asked me to wait for him, so Dr. Beth gave me an e-pad with a map. When the door closed behind me, I put my back to the wall and just breathed for a minute. He'd been very nice for someone who saw me as a test subject, maybe a lab rat, and it wasn't his fault doctors gave me the screaming Wiggins. Maybe someday I'd be able to face an examination without wanting to hide under the bed. Bonus, though, I could stand by flying, even if my shaky legs didn't want to support me. Might be able to get out without a mortifying scene. Keep it together, I thought. I pushed away from the wall and looked at the map, which led me back to the lobby, down another hall, and into a huge conference room. A round oak table dominated the space, engraved with a fancy S over the team motto. Nos praelostor, we stand ready. Or, nos praestolor, rather. Yeah, I need to brush up on my Latin, huh? Anyway, my breath caught. I stood in the Sentinel's famous assembly room. Framed prints of newspaper headlines and photographs of Atlas and the other Sentinels covered one wall. Even with the general wooginess of everything, I had to smile. Atlas was blonde and blue-eyed perfection, wonderfully muscled in his jumpsuit of dark blue leather and white trim, cape and mask to match. The oldest pictures of Atlas showed him at 18 in his first costume. I'd read somewhere he patterned it after the flashy, primary-colored jumpsuits worn by Elvis Presley and Evel Knievel. Able to fly, super strong, super tough, well, he might as well have just put a big red S on his chest instead of the white Roman A, declared himself the champion of truth, justice, the American way, and dared any lawyers to sue for copyright violation. You know what's interesting? Despite truth, justice, and the American way being, the line, they've actually kind of shifted to having him say truth, justice, and a brighter tomorrow, which honestly I kind of like better. And it came out of the 2000s era Superman, who was very like willing to examine the fact that he is in fact an alien in America, and like the force that he has on not just American politics but international politics. It's very interesting to me. But I digress. If I get off onto comics, we will not continue reading this book. Uh, but this book is very much blatantly going to have its influences on its sleeve, and I love it for that. Anyway, the largest team picture, accompanied by a Mayor Forms City Super Team headline, showed all the founding 5 Sentinels. Atlas, naturally, along with Touch's Clouds, Blackstone, Ajax, and Minuteman. The picture even included the team's seldom-seen reservists, Crow and Iron Jack. I stroked the picture frame. The team was larger now, but only 3 of the founders remained. Minuteman was dead, killed by a supervillain, and the most recent picture of Atlas showed him shaking hands with President Touch's Clouds in some White House ceremony. Pretty, isn't it? I nearly jumped out of my skin. While I'd been looking at the pictures, Atlas had walked right up behind me. Super hearing, right. He wore civilian clothes, and if I'd passed him on the street, I wouldn't even have recognized him. In Dockers and a sports shirt, he looked almost nothing like the strong man in the pictures. He was lean, almost skinny, and without the mask, his face looked sharper, more weathered. I blushed hotly when he caught me staring. But, he smiled. Where'd all the muscles go? They're sculpted into the suit. Not that I don't keep a six-pack, but, muscle mass has got nothing to do with what we are. It's just what people expect. Brought you these. He handed me a pile of clothing to replace what I'd pretty much destroyed. Under the sweater and pants were new socks, shoes, and underwear. Discreet personal shoppers and a courier, he answered. He answered my unspoken question. We aim to please. You ready to go home? Just like that? I was so ready. Just like that. We'll talk on the way. I changed into the street clothes, and we stopped in the lobby to make an appointment for tomorrow through Bob. Then we left by the back door, taking an elevator that went sideways and opened into a closet space that in turn opened into a dimly lit underground parking garage. A little gray Saturn waited for us next to a man holding a white cardboard box, the kind you might keep files in. Your things, miss. I lifted the lid. I lifted the lid to find it contained the items from my car: my busted pad, the emergency kit, loose mail, stale mints from the glove compartment. Atlas took the box and dropped it in the middle of the back seat before handing me the keys. Once I got in, he slid into the passenger side. Your Toyota will be a steel cube in a salvage yard before nightfall. If anyone asks, your car's in the shop, and in a couple days you can pick it up. Plates and VIN will match your insurance and DMV records, and so far as you're concerned, this morning never happened. I'm grateful, but why? Because, well, you were unrecognizable at the site, so nobody knows who the new breakthrough is. We're going to keep it that way as long as you want it that way. I got that. That wasn't the question, I bit out, amazed at how fast he could turn gratitude into irritation. He's up there. It's a rental. I looked down to find the steering wheel bending under my grip and let go like I'd been burned. Suddenly my hands were shaking. Deep breaths now, darling. Let me know if you think I should drive. I'm fine, really. I threw open my door, leaned out, and vomited again, then started to cry. He sat there and let me. I hugged myself since nothing else seemed safe, regained control in less than a minute, maybe two. You don't do drama, you keep it for private. Shame helped me push it down. Here. He'd rummaged through the box while I got hold of myself and handed me my water bottle and the stale mints. I rinsed and leaned my head against the wheel while I crunched the mints, silently praying. Please, God, look after your newest angels. Be with the ones who mourn them now. At last I straightened, wiped, sniffed, and could breathe normally again. Thank you. Don't apologize. You've had a bad day. I jerked around at the dryness of his voice, but there was no pity in his eyes. Taking a deep breath, I started the car. Being careful of my grip, I pulled out of the space and turned up the ramp. When we came out on the street, I turned west. You wanted to know why, he said after a couple lights. Should we talk now or when you're home? Now. Band-Aid quick, Dad always says. I sniffed again, spoiling my brave talk, but he smiled at that. What else does he say? I managed a smile of my own. Don't leave old food in the fridge. Back up your computer every day. Punch it like you mean it. And I got a chuckle. There's a card in the glove compartment with a phone number and website address. Go there for the details, but to give you the spoiler, you test within the top 10% of Atlas-type superhumans. Pure A class. Watch the road! I pulled my eyes back to the street, relaxing my grip when the wheel protested again. In superhuman terms, really, you've won the lottery. But now you gotta decide what you're going to do. To do? Shouldn't I do what you do? Why? You can do anything or do nothing with it. Go to school, find a nice fella, start a career. You don't have to see any more days like today. But, he shook his head. Hope, you're not suddenly indispensable. You'll need training to help you with your control, and we'd have to arrange for it right away, but you don't have to become a cape. You don't have to decide now, either. Then he shifted conversational gears and asked me about my family and plans as I drove. What I don't understand,
I finally asked, coming back to what had become the question since I'd first been able to really think again, is why me? Why, like this, I mean. I didn't dream of being Supergirl when I was little. You're asking why you got the Atlas type package? I nodded. Turning onto Columbus, I headed for Harrison to avoid the expressway till we cleared the fallen overpass. The radio cautioned everyone to stay off Eisenhower till the afternoon, and the west arm of the L was down until the tracks could be repaired. Motorcycle cops directed the crawling traffic, and though the emergency vehicles were long gone, helicopters still circled the site. I smelled cement dust and the lingering hint of burned oil and rubber. Only 7 dead. Seemed awful to think that, but half an hour later it would have been dozens. Atlas watched the helicopters without comments, listening to his earbug. When we passed Ashland, he leaned back, stretching his legs as far as the car's foot space would allow, and picked up where he left off. Well, a lot of misleading stuff's been written about breakthroughs, but Trigger's usually the way it's popularly portrayed. Really stressful event. You're in imminent danger of death or severe injury, scared. Adrenaline rushes once your survival instincts kick in. Most breakthroughs happen in life-threatening circumstances. So, breakthrough powers generally get shaped to deal with danger or trauma. How many ways you figure you could have escaped from your car? I blinked. Well, pushing my way out, which I did. Teleportation, I guess. Going all ghostly, maybe? I thought of other capes and their powers. I could have moved the concrete with my mind, or blown a hole with energy blasts, or. He held up a hand. You got the idea. There's dozens of possible variations of the 3 basic responses: push back at the danger, create immunity to the danger, or escape from the danger. And if the danger is from another human being, pushback possibilities get even wider. You could assert mental control, mislead with illusions, attack the person's nervous system with toxins, lots of things. So, when someone breaks through, how do you think they choose from all them possibilities? I thought about it while I negotiated with the blue minivan for right of way in the thinning traffic. I guess it would depend on their natural response. Yep, you're a small one. Your youngest brother's how much older than you? Oh, a year and a half. Bet you got used to fighting back at an early age. Oh, yeah. Toby liked putting my head in an arm lock and noogieing me or messing up my hair, or he'd tease me till I got so mad I'd start swinging and pin my arms and tickle me till I'd almost pass out. Aaron'd stop him when he was around, but with his sports he wasn't there much. How'd you deal with it? Learn to fight. And Toby learned that tormenting you came with a price. I nodded. You see where I'm going with this? He leaned back and turned his attention to the tree-lined road. Your first instinct is to push back, and you're used to pushing back physically. Atlas type's the type for physical pushback. Congratulations. And on that note, I realized I was home. Everybody welcome frequent guest star, Mr. Magnus Cat. He's here. He wants pets. He wants attention. Nobody ever pay him any mind, do they? Hmm. Uh, on the note of Magnus, actually, friendly reminder: we do have emotes around here. I do in fact count as an affiliate, and that means I get emotes, and one of them is Magnus. He's not right, Magnus. He's just a little guy. Anyway, buddy, can we not pick at those? Dad, you shouldn't be wearing these on stream. Yeah, okay. These are not string. Thank you. You're right. I forgot to take those off. It's true. He has a little bread loaf. He's actually a huge fiend for bread and yeast at large. Sometimes I will give him a little treat of some sourdough starter, because he's just a little guy. And whenever I bake bread, I have to make sure he is not capable of reaching it. He has been. I have scooped him up uh, out of licking range from bread multiple times.
I actually have a really good shot I'll post in Discord over the intermission of Magnus like sniffing the bread about to open his little mouth to give it a lick. Anyway, chapter 4. The tea time anarchist has claimed responsibility for this morning's bombing, calling it a political assassination aimed at Senator Todd Davis, sponsor of the controversial Davis Bill. And in Chicago this morning, to attend a conference on superhumans, civil rights, and national security. The proposed law will, if enacted, make most superhuman crimes federal crimes under the jurisdiction of the Department of Superhuman Affairs. The senator and 6 others died in the attack, which may have resulted in a new breakthrough, seen leaving the site with Atlas once rescue operations were complete. At 10, Chicago by Night will be hosting Chakra, Chicago's most controversial sentinel. She will be discussing her new book, The Sacred Gates, a manual on meditation, yoga, and tantric sex. Back to you, Vince. Unsurprisingly, that's from the morning news in Chicago. My home is one of the colorfully restored Victorian mansions on Oak Park's sleepy, tree-lined Chicago Avenue. Dad worked on it for years, but all of us helped, and we still spend a few days together each summer repainting the trim. Pulling into the drive, we found a second car with a driver waiting for Atlas. He reminded me of the card in the glove compartment and tomorrow's appointment, and drove away. Wasn't much farther after, too. The rain, barely more than a mist, kissed my face as I stood on the porch, breathing in the rich ozone and wet earth and leaf smell. For a moment, everything felt normal again. I waved at Miss Morris across the street, and her poodle Travis growled at me. I smiled. Going inside, I found the house empty, so I fed Graymalkin while he purred and head-dived my ankles, then texted Julie and canceled our mall diving plans with a promise to talk. Upstairs, I put the box in my room and showered again before slipping into a tank top and shorts to curl up on my bed with my University of Chicago bear. It was a graduation present. Just not thinking for a while. Finally, I got up, went to my dresser, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out the old Christmas tin. I'd ignored it for years. I decorated the lid when I was 10, spelling Shelley and Hope with paper letters I'd cut out and glued on. Shelley'd been my childhood playmate and confidant, my fearless leader and instigator of adventure and trouble, my BFF, and I'd stuffed the tin with notes we'd passed in school, cheap jewelry gifts, bundled stack of pictures from camp, parties, us at the freshman dance, and her funeral program. I sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor and thumbed through the photos, finally finding the Halloween picture Mom took when we were 13. I'd dressed as Tiger's Eye, Shelley as Lily Strong. Her mom had stitched on the detailing that turned the dance tights into costumes. I'd lied to Atlas. Like so many girls, we'd dreamed of being superheroines. For me, it'd been more about the look and the dream of team-ups with cool celebrity heroes like Atlas, Volt, or Burnout, but Shelley'd been serious. She'd memorized all of Barlow's Guide to Superhumans, endlessly sketched her own costumes, bought every edition of Hero Beat and Power Week, recorded every episode of Protectors. She got most of it from her mom, who thought girls should have other interests. And Miss Boiler had been right. When we were 15, Shelley jumped off the roof of an apartment building. There'd been a quiet but intense argument in the parish over whether it had been suicide, but it hadn't been. She decided that the threat of imminent death by falling would trigger her breakthrough. She'd be one of the lucky ones. She'd been inspired by a magazine story of how Legal Eagle had gained his flight powers when his parachute failed to open. She'd jump, she'd fall, and she'd fly, but she didn't. After that, I threw away anything related to our young obsession, with the exception of Winnie the Super Pooh and the Halloween photo. Mom had taken Super Pooh to repair his homemade Atlas costume. Every girl's entitled to one celebrity crush, and Atlas was never going to learn he'd been mine, and she hid him from me. The photo had gotten mixed up all in the family pictures for me to find later. I even trashed the home movie of the sleepover we had before the week before she jumped. It had included one of her "You Can Call Me Power Chick" monologues. Her family moved away the next year, and I'd been selfishly glad. I couldn't bear to look at her mom.
Eventually, I put the tin away, wiped my eyes, and went online and downloaded and printed the file Atlas said waited for me. But before I read it, I spent some time surfing the net for information on the Tea Time Anarchist. He was a strange villain, a complete unknown. The press gave him the name since he sounded vaguely British in the few doctored recordings he'd made, and in those he'd always worn a nylon mask and a long evening coat for concealment. A couple of years after the event, he published a manifesto accusing the federal government of conspiring to rob U.S. citizens of their liberties and create a totalitarian dictatorship. First step, identify and control the country's superhumans. Then he got busy. He started with non-lethal pranks. I remembered one, 5 tons of jelly beans in a U.S. Senate hearing. But then he escalated. In the last 5 years, one more time. In the last 5 years, he'd claimed responsibility for 11 bombings in which 52 people had died. He'd killed judges, lawmakers, marshals, soldiers, lots of bystanders. And this morning, a U.S. senator and half a dozen innocent commuters. I'd been empowered by the indiscriminate evil of a madman. Shutting down my laptop, I pulled the pages off my printer and returned to my bed to read my examination file. The numbers were scary. The kid's sister of 3 older brothers, I'd learned to put up with my share of roughhousing, and I'd played field hockey in high school, best sweeper in the Chicago League even. Mom had enrolled me in a self-defense course when I turned 16, but small is small. Best I could reasonably do in a real fight was kick the bad guy in the knee and run like hell while he hopped on the other leg. Now, another story. I could kill a man with my finger. Sorry, I need to take a second. I forgot that this was like a part of the opening plot, which was establishing what happened to her childhood friend and why she has trauma around becoming a superhero. And I was like, oh, I was reading that and it all came back to me the second the name Shelley came up. I was like, oh, I forgot about that. Um, don't do that. Don't. I want to. I could be a lot more erudite and long-winded about that, but don't go doing that. Being alive is full of occasional difficulties, but it's worth it. Yeah, I could carry on. Just don't. Um, Sorry, that's really throwing off my train of thought here. I was originally gonna, I was when I was taking a breather, I was gonna, I was gonna, you know, point out some things that I do, but it feels a little ill-advised. Anyway, let's resume here. Where were we? Oh yeah. Mom had enrolled me in a self-defense course when I had turned 16, but small is small. The best I could reasonably do in a real fight was kick the bad guy in the knee and run like hell while he hopped on the other leg. Now, I could kill a man with my finger. My maximum lift without overdoing it and doing bad things to myself was just over 10 tons. To put that into perspective, Dr. Beth had thoughtfully included a list. A business jet weighed nearly 9 tons, a loaded semi-truck about 10. I couldn't pick up a tank, but I could easily flip one over like a turtle on its back. Punching someone, that universal superhero activity, my punch could shatter bones, pulp internal organs, mess a man up something awful. Imagine an Olympic weightlifter swinging a 10-pound sledgehammer. Ugh. Putting serious effort behind it, I could hit like an anti-tank missile. How tough was I? I laughed at civilian weapons. Hypothetical tank he kept comparing me to could hurt me, though. A lot. Tough all the way through. Unlike the tank, I could heal 10 times as fast as a normal person. And I wanted to know how he figured that one out. As for flying, based on the flying pushes he made me do, Dr. Beth clocked me at a hypothetical 632 mile an hour. Though he cautioned that turbulence would make control difficult at that speed. so I could fly faster than commercial jets, but not military jets. He'd attached a note to the end of the file. Speak to military recruiters. Apparently, being in the top 10% of Atlas types meant I could earn 20 times the salary of a soldier of the same grade. No wonder I'd been weaponized. And it was going to change everything. I was so not looking forward to tonight's dinner conversation. No, that's not going to happen, Dad said. Mom didn't say anything, which meant she didn't agree with him. She didn't agree with him, at least not yet. The after-dinner discussion wasn't going well. I'd waited until the dessert course to break the news. Over the strawberry pudding cake, I explained why a rental car sat in the driveway. Then I showed them the file and told them I'd decided to be a superhero, or at least to try. Atlas had been right that I didn't have to make a decision immediately, but he'd been wrong to think there was any real decision for me to make. Dad didn't agree, and I'd known he wouldn't. It just happened this morning. Have you really thought about it? Mom asked. I haven't thought about anything else. And your education? I think... Dad thumped the table. Just a damn minute. We didn't raise you to be some costume crime fighter. I know, Dad, but can I ignore it? My voice wanted to break, but I pushed ahead. I can help people, make a difference. You already can make a difference. But anybody can do what I do for Mom. There's Vicky and Susan and Joyce and... Mom took my hand. You know what your father means, dear. You're still 18. Don't you think the city has enough superheroes? I nodded. My eyes stung, but I pushed it down. If I cried, they'd treat me like a child. I don't want any of it. I wish this morning hadn't happened. Then why? She asked gently. If I don't use this, I don't know, it's like winning $1 zillion and not using it to help people. It just feels wrong. She accepted that, and Dad could see it too. Damn it. Language, dear. This is your fault too. We both raised her to take responsibility. His big hands clenched on the tabletop, and he looked like he wanted to tear his hair out, but then he deflated, just like that. Hope. He sighed and looked at Mom. There's something we need to show you. Mom nodded, and he left the table and went upstairs, leaving me to wonder what was going on. When he came back down, he'd put on sweats, and he stopped beside his chair instead of sitting down again. Then he changed. Holy Mother of God. In one long breath, Dad went from being, well, Dad, to a human sculpture made of riveted iron plates, thickening and losing height as he changed. The wood panel floor creaked as he gained weight. I screamed like a girl before clapping a hand over my mouth, and found myself out of my chair and in the air with my back to the wall, my head bumping the ceiling. I touched back down quick, but couldn't bring myself to take a step forward. Hope it's me, he stated the obvious in a deep, almost crackling voice. You're Iron Jack? He nodded. Changed the day of the event when a bus ran through the construction site. Spent most of the day playing Jaws of Life. He flexed huge metal hands that looked like they could peel open cars as easily as I had this morning. Iron Jack had been one of the first. He'd been there, right along with Atlas, He'd been there, right along with Atlas, pulling people out of burning buildings or digging them out of the rubble down on the loop. But Cape Watchers didn't see him much after that, mostly for the occasional civil emergency, like tornadoes, floods, hurricanes. He fought in the awful mess of the China War, where I thought my dad had mobilized in his position as a National Guard Army engineer. I righted my chair with shaking hands, picking through and tossing all the stupid questions. I'd be adult about this if it killed me. Only one question really mattered right now, anyway. Why didn't you become a real sentinel? Sweetheart, how many sentinels have died? Oh. Besides Minuteman, 2 others had been killed in action. Roland died in the China War, Impact after he left the team to fight for Israel. Dad shrugged massively. If I'd been single, if we hadn't had you children, maybe, probably, I'd have done it. He made a fist. certainly good at what I do, which is lift really heavy stuff and punch hard and stand tough, are responsibilities. His fist opened, releasing what? Another life? Then I was around the table and in his arms. Felt like hugging a warm and breathing statue. He was a superhero and he'd set it aside for us. Mom joined us in the hug and I laughed. Like this, I was as tall as he was. Dad changed back so he could sit down and we moved the discussion to the living room. I sat on the floor while Mom sat beside him on the couch, and I asked all about it, back at the beginning and later. I learned the children of breakthroughs were much more likely to have breakthroughs as well. They'd prepared themselves, but thought if it had happened, it'd be one of my brothers, far more likely to get into trouble anyway. They absolutely agreed with my intention to keep my identity secret, whatever kind of career path I intended to take. He and Mom obviously hoped I'd take the safer path, only be active for civil emergencies. We talked into the night till I found my eyes shutting of their own volition. I finally went up to bed, knowing that they'd be up long after. Mom, at least, and Anne Marie, named after two saints, would be saying the rosary and telling her holy namesakes just how things were going to be from here on out. I didn't know they'd start making plans without me.
I forgot how like fantastic this is as an opening. Like, just really immediately sinks its teeth into you and just keeps running. Harmon here has a incredible grasp on what makes a good couple first acts for a superhero story, and honestly, as this book goes on, you'll find that generally has a very good grasp on how to write superheroes, especially in the setting that's being crafted here. And the series at large really works with some really interesting spins on superhero tropes. Hopefully, we'll be able to do that as we continue. But for now, let's dive into Chapter 5. A breakthrough is an unpredictable survival mechanism, and the degree of empowerment it provides varies widely. Sometimes it's just enough to deal with the situation. Other times it's far beyond that. For example, accidental electrocution kills and injures hundreds, if not thousands of people every year, so electrokinetic breakthroughs are relatively common. But a breakthrough could simply make you immune to electrical shock or give you taser-like abilities. Or, as it did for Volt, it could give you the power to drain electrical systems, generate electromagnetic pulses, fly by electrostatic levitation, and throw ball lightning. That's a quote from Barlow's Guide to Superhumans. As I ran through the atrium, something cracked the dome. Chunks of ceiling rained down as staff and tourists screamed, and a large piece landed directly on the reception desk where Tom stood yelling into his headset. The building shook and steel plates dropped into place over the elevator bay, but I kept looking. Yes, there she was, holding her mother's hand. Remembering I could fly, I launched myself at them as the ceiling caved and the roof of the dome came down. I screamed as Faith disappeared under tons of concrete. And sat up, my heart thundering in my chest. Falling back, I pushed damp hair out of my eyes with shaking fingers as Greymalkin complained. A dream. Only a dream. I tried to remember if I'd really screamed and couldn't. Faith. That's who the Munchkin reminded me of. The big sister I didn't remember, who died of aggressive systemic scleroderma when I was only 3. I wasn't a naturally brave person. When I'd gotten sick, my guiding thought would be Faith. Faith would be brave. I'd tried to save Faith yesterday. What am I doing? I buried my head in my pillow and sneezed. Looking down, I found that sometime during my dream I'd murdered my innocent pillow. Goose feathers floated everywhere. As bits of down settled on Greymalkin, he flicked his ears and stalked off in disgust. I started giggling and couldn't stop even when the down began sticking to my cheeks. At breakfast, I learned about my reprieve. Dad had called the dome and gotten my appointment pushed back a day if I promised him I'd stay home. I agreed, with relief, and spent the day texting and going over lists for the gallery event with Susan and just resting. Mom stayed home most of the day too, not crowding me, but making sure to be there if I wanted to talk.
Boy, did I ever. I just didn't know what to talk about. Ugh, really? You know, one of these times. Are we good? Are we real? Are we good? Can I read? Hang on. Give me four, three, two, one. Now we should be back? No? Really? Hang on. Give me just a few moments here. I'm gonna try and cycle a few things. Not the least of which being my leggies. Ugh. These jeans I'm wearing are just slightly tight because the denim has not loosened yet. So I'm just over here. There we go. Sorry, gang. I don't quite know why that keeps happening. I really should just run a little Ethernet cable from here to the router and just have that on stream nights, to be honest with you. It would likely solve the issue. Now that we're back online here. I want to stress now that we're back online here, do stick around. If the stream randomly ends, the stream is not over until I have rated out to someone. Or I post in chat like, hey, it's too much and I'm done. I will specifically notify you when stream is over. Uh, I just have, how do I put this politely? Spotty internet sometimes. I'm working on a solution actually. Actually, so I have multiple options here. So the really good option here would be just run a cable wired under the door and just do it that way. And that would be the simplest option and just, hope that my roommates don't trip over the cable. But I also could just extend the cabling on my Wi-Fi card for my computer. Just extend the cabling on the antennae, which is kind of cheesy, but it would work. Anyway, where were we? Ah, uh, they wanted to talk. Boy, did I ever want to talk. I just didn't know what to talk about. Well, obviously. I just didn't know how. Not knowing what to say about anything, I even put Julie off. It rained off and on through the night as I lay awake listening, enough to keep the roads wet and give the fallen leaves some weight against the wind. Mom and Dad had cleared their schedules to accompany me back to the dome, and after a silent breakfast we took the family van into town. Eisenhower was clear again. They'd already reopened the expressway and tracks, and they were installing a temporary overpass. I saw the crew out in their bright blue jumpsuits, lifting and floating steel frames into place. It'd be done by the end of the day. And that's how they get it done that fast. It's those people on the crew, TM. Dad waved to the gate guard at the Wabash rather. Dad waved to the gate guard at the Wabash and Jackson parking garage and used the key card to access the ramp to the lowest level. Our reception shocked me. The Harlequin met us in the downstairs lobby, unmistakable with her slick latex-like skin and black and white Harlequin costume. A contortionist and acrobat from Cirque du Soleil in Las Vegas, she'd experienced her transforming breakthrough in a stage accident in front of a few hundred spectators. An animated mannequin, she moved like the dancer she'd been. Iron Jack, it's so good to see you again. Miss Corrigan. She shook our hands. Please, call me Quinn. Ajax, aka Professor Charles Gibbons, stood beside her. He took up much more room. A big man with rich mahogany skin and elaborately cornrowed hair, he had one of the friendliest faces I'd ever seen, but his sunny expression didn't go with the black sort of Greek armor he wore and the huge bell-shaped maul he carried. He gave me a smile as he shook hands all round, nodding to Dad. I returned the shake. awed. A thick-set man in a brown sport coat stood just behind him. Him, at least, I knew personally. "Alex Chandler," he said, taking his turn. "Call me Al." "We know who you are, Mr. Chandler," Mom said, smiling. "You're on our list." He barked a laugh, acknowledging the point. Atlas's older brother, he'd used his marketing practice to mastermind the media campaign that launched Atlas and the Sentinels, and he'd helped sponsor more than a few Foundation events. As blond as his brother, but with a touch of silver, he looked like a former high school linebacker who'd taken good care of himself. He and Atlas shared the same dimple, but I couldn't say I liked him. Seemed to me that under his charm, he was always sizing people up, deciding how useful they'd be to him. He'd pretty much always ignored me, but I could see him sizing me up now. Bob, we'll take the assembly room if that's all right," said Quinn. Bob just nodded behind his desk, obviously not one for small talk, and they ushered us down the hall and into the room. We sat, and Al dropped his briefcase on the conference table, briskly snapping the latches and removing a file to set between us. I settled in between Mom and Dad. Unfairly, they looked totally comfortable. Ankles crossed and hands folded, I tried to project confidence. I'd taken my cue from the parents and dressed for a Foundation business meeting, so I wore a gray business jacket and skirt with a white blouse under a darker vest. I'd applied minimal makeup and wore my platinum blonde bob styled back to bare my forehead. I felt ready for the room. Then I nearly jumped out of my skin again, barely biting down on a shriek as a hand reached around my shoulder and deposited a white china cup and saucer at my elbow. I clutched my chest to make sure my heart was still beating. The man attached to the hand was an older gentleman with salt and pepper hair and a thin face punctuated by a mustache so trim it looked like his upper lip had eyebrows. He'd come in through another door. What was it about this room that let people creep up on me? "Could you be any sneakier?" "I was a ninja barista in a former life, ma'am." Dad laughed as the man finished arranging everyone's cups. "Hey, thank you, Willis. Astra, this is Willis, the dome's major domo. Willis, Astra, and her parents. A pleasure, ma'am. Ma'am. Sir." He sounded impeccably British. "Should you need anything, I am at your service." He gave a polite nod and departed. I tried the coffee to settle my nerves, consciously imitating Mom. It was delicious. Everyone else gave theirs the attention such creations were due, and Al cleared his throat. Trying to decide if Al has the same, like the same level of accent as his brother. You know what? I like it, actually. Let's lean in. Now, Astra, first we'd like to... You know what? Actually, he's like a marketing guy. I feel like he'd play his accent down a little bit. Sorry, coming up with this on the fly. Because the voices these characters have in my head are not all within my range. Now, Astra, first we'd like to thank you for taking Atlas up on his offer to arrange for training. There are several places available for training Atlas-type superhumans, including an excellent facility in Maryland run by the U.S. Marshals Service, and they'd be sensitive of your desire to protect your private identity. However, we have a more particular offer to make you. He tapped the file meaningfully. Atlas would like to oversee your training himself, at least parts of it. I gasped, or I gaped, stunned by the offer. Mom and Dad didn't say anything. To your credit, his offer surprised me too. Your training wouldn't be restricted to the dome. A lot would be fly and try stuff in the field under his supervision. Although you wouldn't be a card-carrying sentinel, you'd be publicly associated with us from the beginning. In fact, Atlas has indicated a willingness to take you on as his sidekick. Now I was beyond stunnage. Breakthroughs happen at all ages, and young breakthroughs need training just like anyone else. The comic books supplied the perfect solution. Sidekicks. They could be paired with experienced mentors with at least their level of power. It's not a universal practice, mind, but I know it's often just that or super school. And despite appearances, I was just too old for that. While John hasn't shared his reasons with me, I'm sure he sees it as solving, at least temporarily, one of our problems. Have you looked at the lineup of the team recently? I hadn't, to be honest. Although if it had changed recently, I'd heard. Besides Atlas, Ajax, and Blackstone, there was Chakra, Rush, Nimbus, and the Harlequin. Others had been added to and dropped from the team roster, but they'd been down two from their usual nine for a couple of years. I shook my head. I couldn't see where he was going. Quinn surprised me by laughing. What I was trying to get at right now is that the team doesn't really have any Amazons. Nimbus is really the most physically dangerous member of the team, but she's a specialist, and you consider the rest of us girls. Physically, we're not heavy hitters, so the team has been taking some criticism for perpetuating female stereotypes and not welcoming strong female members. But how does adding a pixie to the lineup help? I interrupted. She laughed again. A pixie that can bench press buses? You're young, cute as a button, and you can fight closer to Atlas's weight than any other Amazon in the city. And consider the popular perception of the team dynamic. Who's the leader of the team? Atlas, I said immediately. He was the first. Ajax shook his head. Seniority has nothing to do with it, he interjected. He had a wonderfully deep voice like rough honey. A tenured professor, he taught the much-coveted Superhuman History Survey course at U of C. He was the youngest of us when we founded the team, and right now only Quinn and Rush are younger. He's our field leader because he's mobile, fast-thinking, and unlikely to get taken out in a fight. He's also been the public face of the team since Touch's Clouds left to go into politics. Quinn knocked on the oak table. We certainly don't need a spare with Atlas around, but it's good to add depth to the bench. But we wouldn't want to add another Atlas-type man. The two of them would constantly be compared in the press and pitted against each other in the tabloids. Media-wise, you appeal to a completely different demographic. But I could already see the publicity shots of Atlas and me. Matching costumes would be involved. I'd look disgustingly cute. Now, we need to discuss your training, Ajax said, folding his hands. We must begin immediately, and I'm afraid you're going to have to disappear for a while. How long? I asked with a sick, sinking feeling. Orientation day's next week. At least a month. Closer to 2. I heard a sharp crack and looked down to realize I'd broken my cup. Bits of china dropped from my fingers, and the remains of my coffee had spilled over the saucer. Astra, he said, kindly ignoring the mess. You're the second strongest Atlas type in Chicago now. There are only 7 stronger than you in the country. 3 of them are in the military. More than anything, you need to learn control. And until you do, you're not only dangerous to everyone around you, you could give away what you've become in 1,000 easy ways. If you want to keep your secrets safe, keep your friends and family safe, you need to remove yourself from your normal life until you've got experience with your new strength and abilities. I shook my head in desperate denial, but thought of last night in the pillow. It could have been Gray, or Mom, or Dad. Oh, God. Mom gave my hand a squeeze, and I was afraid to return it. The world wobbled, and I realized I was breathing fast. But school, I'm going to pledge Phi Mu with the bees. We're sharing rooms in Pilevsky Commons. Dad shook his head. No, honey, you're not. Your mother and I have already come up with a cover story for you. We're going to tell everyone that your cancer might be coming back. Since Aaron's interning at Johns Hopkins, you're going there for testing and treatment and staying with Aaron and Cindy. They'll be able to supply enough details to make the story completely believable. You'll be able to take online courses at U of C from right here at the Dome, so I've got to lie to the bees, tell them I'm sick again? Julie's family lived in our parish, and after Shelley's funeral, she'd ruthlessly dragged me into her circle, which till then had only included Annabeth and Megan. Together, since middle school, the bees, as in Brennan, Bauman, and Brock, had reigned as the benevolent dictators of the it crowd of Oak Park. They hadn't been my crowd, but by Julie's decree, the bees had become Hope in the Bees. We'd worked hard to keep the team together, to get everyone accepted at U of C. We'd be sisters forever, aunties to each other's kids. I guess aunties, I suppose they are in Chicago. Mom squeezed my hand again. You'll be able to tell them eventually, dear. Just. I nodded, blinking. I know. The thought of Annabeth trying to keep my secret was sadly funny. She could, for maybe 5 minutes, a day tops. If I couldn't tell one of them, I couldn't tell any of them. Where will I be staying? The dome is as self-contained as a military base, and Ajax explained that everybody had an apartment, even the sentinels who lived elsewhere when not on the job. When he opened the door and ushered us into my apartment, I stopped and stared, momentarily distracted from my misery, in shock at the luxury of my jail. The main room was a combination living room and entertainment center. It was lit by the same kind of indirect lighting as the halls, with the biggest TV screen I'd ever seen outside of a movie war room. Tiptoeing into the bedroom, I found a queen-size bed buried in pillows, a smaller flat-screen TV I could watch in bed, and a study nook. Through the door into the bathroom, I could see one of those decadent five-headed showers, complete with waterfall that you read about in fancy home improvement magazines. A kitchen corner held a large mini-fridge, an attached microwave and pantry. Ajax pointed out an apartment phone next to it for when I wanted to call Willis and ask for something I didn't stock. If I was too lazy to walk down the hall to the common dining area and fix it to myself anyway.
Sorry, I love this description, but also immediately, like, you can see, you can really, like, draw lines between, the characters that make up the Sentinels. But this is also, this kind of dips its toe into something that I think wearing the cape in particular does really, really well, which is how much superhero teams would come down to like marketing and design and truthfully celebrity level choices in like public relations and that sort of thing. It isn't something that a lot of comics that I've read have really touched on, but this really like digs into it and examines what celebrity culture might look like when uh there's an entirely separate class of celebrity. Oh, uh, a raid from Arnel Quendi. Welcome, welcome, everyone. Uh, we are in the process of reading. Uh, we're in the process of reading. Uh, Wearing the Cape by Marion Harmon. By author permission, we're stepping out of the public domain in a rarity for the show. Since you're coming from RNLs, you kind of know in a nutshell what's happening tonight. We're reading a book aloud for a while. RNL rating in. Uh, Before I get started on the codex, let me introduce myself. My name is Glacier Nestor. As you can see, we are reading a book this evening, but that's not the only thing I do. I also stream things other than books. On Tuesday nights, I stream a good-sized mix of mending and sewing, um, video games, and just generalized maker stuff. Um, it's all very delightful. So if you're not in the mood for a book this evening, more book as it were, uh, do feel free to come back Tuesday. But I would heartily suggest you stay. This book is fantastic. It's been a favorite of mine for many, many years, and I'm so glad the author said yes. Oh, and if you want to catch up on the backlog, there's not just a YouTube channel where you can do that. There is also a podcast uh, where I edit down these live episodes into into episodes that go onto a podcast feed. So if you have a particular proclivity for a certain style of book, uh, you could go digging through the episodes. Yeah, RNL, I've actually got a maker stream plan. Do I have my bag here in a way that I can show it to everyone? I have my bag here. I just realized that I'm in the middle of a project and I don't want to disturb the thread too badly. But I'm currently working on a large scale sashiko mend, and we now that you've pointed it out, it has been a little bit since I've done a maker stream, so we'll definitely be doing some sashiko mends. Much as I would really love to play more Balatro, Balatro good. Um, but the Discord's also a really great place to keep up with the maker stuff. Everything that I can't manage to do on stream, I tend to post pictures, even progress pictures, in my Discord. While we're off topic, I would also like to mention RNL showing up makes this a good point to do this. I'm on a Twitch team called Codex. You should be able to see it somewhere down underneath me, depending on if you're on mobile or on desktop. It's down there somewhere. And they are a group of fellow reading streamers. We all pretty broadly have at least one night in which we focus on our reading endeavors. We span the genre gamut pretty broadly. Um, Arnold, are you still kicking around on visual novels? I've been keeping one eye on your titles and the like, but I unfortunately you tend to stream when I have a lot of limes in the air. Um, but I do show up when I can and usually wind up lurking. But RNL does a pretty broad gamut of very interesting books. Jevons is another one from the group who I like to keep one eye on. Reads a lot of really great stuff. I think most recently The Wizard of Oz, which longtime listeners around here will know I really enjoyed reading, and I've been enjoying listening, lurking wise. Um, you know, uh, it's just like a group of fellow reading streamers, and I think we all kind of tend to cross promote each other because we're all kind of doing the same thing, and it makes sense, you know. So if I'm ever running into a night where my internet or my general everything is not allowing me to stream, I will heartily suggest you go check out my fellow readers in the Codex. Anyway, promotional spieled. Where were we? Oh, we were looking at the room that our main character gets to live in for the next month while she trains her powers. There we are. The closet, a huge walk-in, held a full-size mirror and changing space. Dad just looked around and nodded. The accommodations befit his princess. Mom promised to have my stuff packed and over by tonight. She whipped out her cell phone and took pictures of everything, and I just knew they'd have paintings and art for the bare walls and spaces in a couple of days if I didn't stop them. Ooh, one more thing before we continue. RNL, if you need to raid and fade, I know it takes a lot out of me to stream and then go hang out in someone's chat, so do feel free to lurk or, just drop out. But thank you for bringing your community here. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a great evening. Anyway, Ajax stepped out to give us a moment alone, and Dad drew me into a bear hug. He pulled back, still holding my shoulders, and dropped a kiss on my forehead. Well, I nodded quickly, then gave up and threw my arms around his neck, barely remembering not to squeeze. He squeezed for me, lifting me off the carpet, while pointing out gruffly that my laptop had a webcam and I hadn't left the city. And in a couple of months, I'd be able to come home and everything would be back to normal. I didn't agree with him, but I didn't fight him on it either. Mom gave me a kiss and informed me that she expected me for Mass and Sunday dinner before I flew out. And then they were gone. With my new super duper hearing, I heard them talking to Ajax as they headed for the elevator, wringing all sorts of promises from the man. Oh, I would like to once again stress. Once again stress. Yeah, I would like to once again stress, stream is not over until I say on stream or in chat that stream is over, and stream is not over. We're still live. I really appreciate your patience, gang. I'm working on the internet trouble. I have a couple clever ideas floating around. I just need to examine the design of my Wi-Fi card a little bit and see once if it is more worth it for me to just invest in some Ethernet cabling, or if I can extend the antennae of my Wi-Fi card to more directly gather the Wi-Fi. Actually, I have a somewhere around here. I have some designs for a like an actual like dish, and ideally, if I can examine the design of the antennae correctly, I can build a little dish that I can stick on the side of my door. Actually, let me illustrate my point here. So, see how I've got some stuff hanging over this door? That means I could also do that on the other side of the door. Can you see the door? Hang on. You cannot see the door. Disregard, I don't need to stand up. But the idea is I can put a little, one of those little wire mesh spoons that you fish stuff out of frying oil with? The idea is I'm going to take one of those and I'm going to extend the cable on one of the antennae for my Wi-Fi card. And I'm going to hook that over my door so then the little dish concentrates the Wi-Fi into the antenna is hopefully what will happen, so that I don't have a long snaking Ethernet cord that my roommates have to worry about not tripping over. But I need to, examine the design of several things and make sure that I can do what I think I can. In the meanwhile, I appreciate everyone's patience. Back to the book, shall we? I flopped onto my new bed. The sheets had an absurdly high thread count. Somewhere Shelley had to be laughing, but I didn't think it was funny. I tried not to feel like an unwanted pet abandoned at the side of the road, a dog that had gotten too big for the house. My chin quivered warningly, and I took a deep breath, using oxygen to fight off my defeat. I wanted so much to agree with him. 2 months, then I could have my life back. Dad couldn't stand the idea of his little girl risking her life getting hurt. I'd been so looking forward to college life with the bees. Everyone had plans for me, and I liked them, but like I'd told Mom and Dad, it felt wrong. "You're not suddenly indispensable," Atlas had said. And he was right, but he was wrong, too. I couldn't save little Kimberly or her mom, but yesterday the news report that gave me their names credited 5 other saves in the Ashland bombing to that new mystery woman. To me. Gifts were to be used. The parentals had taught me that. So what now? Well, one thing at a time. I wiped my eyes and reached for my cell. Chapter 6. Even in the beginning, Atlas never went for the briefs outside the tights look, but there are plenty who did. I started with spandex shorts and a cape. What possesses a person, already a freak to begin with, to put on a cape and a mask and let people give her a funny name? Alright, I'll grant that there are good reasons for the mask and the code name, but the rest? What are we, 10? Astra, notes from a life. I phoned Susan to call in sick again, though I hated to. Mom's best event coordinator, a perpetually harried woman who always had pencils and pens stuck in her ragged French bun. She could run the show without me if it came to that. I promised faithfully that I'd be there the next night unless I was dying. An unfortunate word choice, considering the cover story. But I'd be careful not to touch anything remotely breakable, whatever, but I wasn't going to miss it. I wouldn't allow it. Then I texted Julie to tell them I couldn't make it to our lunch date and make sure that all 3 of the bees were going to be at the gallery. I promptly got 3 WTF responses and felt even worse. Always busy with school and the foundation, I'd never blown off the bees. As I wondered how I was going to be able to lie to them, someone knocked on the door. Quinn stood outside with another jumpsuit for me, this time with a mask and wig. "The Newsies got footage of you leaving the bomb site, so you're part of the story," she explained as I changed. "They didn't get a great picture, but they're running it again alongside the new Tea Time Anarchist story. The DSA found the safe house where the
Bombs were made, but he's still in the wind. He released a new video file promising more death and destruction if the feds don't back off. She handed me the wig. So, we need to bring you out at a press conference as soon as we can, where people can stop speculating and see you. You're the one positive piece of the story. The body scan part of your checkup Monday gave us all the measurements we needed, so we're going to see Andrew right now. Andrew? I asked to distract myself from the images of the bombing my mind conjured up. I could still smell it like smoke in my clothes. The designer for a sartorially sophisticated superhero. The team picks up the tab for his creations. All part of the PR. Tom drove us in a car with tinted windows, and Andrew's studio turned out to be off Michigan Avenue, not far from Bennigan's Tavern. It had a narrow front, just a solid oak door framed in decorative molding, with Andrew's designs in gold above the lintel. Andrew assumed, I suppose, that if you didn't know what he designed, you didn't need to know. Inside, at the end of a long hall hung with track lights lighting gallery prints of celebrity superheroes, mostly high-fashion shots by famous photographers for magazines like Vogue and GQ, we met Andrew in a cozy parlor. Andrew wasn't what I expected. The man stood tall at around 6'2", as tall as Dad, though Dad was heavier. Andrew didn't have an inch of fat on him. He looked like G.I. Joe gone civilian, and he was all business. Pulling a stack of boxes out of a wardrobe, he pushed me behind a screen and told me how to dress. I had trouble with the mask, and he helped to pull and tug the thing snugly back and over my head, then led me out to stand in front of a three-way mirror. He fussed briefly with the fall of the cape, while I stared at the girl in the full-length mirrors, speechless. The outfit was the same blue and white scheme as Atlas's leather jumpsuit, but the resemblance ended there. Instead of a jumpsuit, I wore a two-piece costume with a short cape. The blue top was a sleeveless leather vest with a sweetheart neckline, belted at the waist over a pair of white spandex boy-leg shorts. The vest hugged my small waist and hid inserts that changed my immature bust into a more grown-up one, and the white cape hung from buckles on the shoulders to just barely below my costume bottom. A white eight-pointed star sat on my chest, its cardinal points longer than its secondary points, so it looked a bit like a compass symbol, except that the south, or down point, was longer than all the others. The silver buckle at the waist sported the Sentinel's trademark S. Both Atlas and Quinn wore token masks, domino masks that only hid a bit of face around their eyes, but mine gave some serious coverage. The snug half mask of blue leather covered my face from just below my cheekbones to past the edge of my scalp, with a cleverly attached wig that darkened my platinum blonde hair by several shades and added 5 or 6 inches to fall down behind my shoulders. White leather gloves and blue boots with hidden lifts completed the outfit. Taken all together, it seemed to hide nothing and exaggerate nothing, but... Well, Quinn prodded. I hardly knew where to begin. I still get mistaken for a middle schooler, but it's amazing. The costume, thankfully, didn't have the do-me look that modish superheroes were adopting, but it transformed me from someone who didn't look like she should be driving into an unmistakable adult. And a superhero. Monday, I'd been just plain Hope, and now a superhero looked back at me. Even my own family wouldn't recognize me. Andrew watched me closely. Have Atlas show you how to hang everything from the belt. What do you think of your crest? My what? I couldn't look away. The star symbol. I thought of just using Atlas's A, since you share the same initial, but really, I think you need your own. Oh! I turned to face him. It looks good, I guess. He sighed. Astra, the crest is the most important part of the costume. You can change your costume style, even your colors, when you graduate from being a sidekick, but you'll never change the symbol unless you're trying to create a whole new superhero persona. Purist, Quinn laughed at him. It's a marketing thing, Astra. Atlas has his Roman A, Chakra has her pink lotus. I've got my crown diamond. We even sell them on t-shirts and stuff. Oh, I repeated. I tried to look at it critically, but shied away from the idea of having a symbol. I like it. Done, then. Andrew clapped his hands, rubbing them together. Then he turned to a folder he'd brought with him. It held page after page of color sketches of Harlequin costumes, from her standard diagonal checkered body stocking to frilled skirts and tights, ruffled shirts and patched vests, cravats and tied sleeves, waistcoats, jackets, slippers, shoes, boots, and hats. The sketches ran from playful to sexy, formal, and even businesslike. Delighted, Quinn spent some time poring over the designs while Andrew watched her, smiling. I made some comments, but mostly just sat trying to catch up in my head. At the end of the hour, Andrew shooed us out with a smile for me and a wink for Quinn. Back on the street, I turned to Quinn to ask just what the wink had been about, and a flash lit off in my face. I knew the lanky, grinning guy under the tousled, dirty blonde hair holding the camera. "Hey, turn this way! Who's your friend?" I almost blurted his name. Confronted by Terry Reinhold, a photojournalist and columnist who worked Chicago's superhero and society beat for his column City Watch, Quinn looked dumbfounded. She scowled. "Terry, aren't you going to introduce us? The? I asked. "Her name, don't you know? Her first name, at least. The Harlequin." Her scowl deepened. "Terry, so help me. So you going to introduce us, or am I going to have to wait till Monday like everyone else? The show'll make a handy column topper. Till then, Harlequin seem leaving Andrews with stylish new mystery woman. Damn it, Terry." "Ah, come on, Quinn. I've been staking Andrews out for 2 days. You gotta give me something." Tom had pulled up, drawing more attention from afternoon strollers. Quinn ground her teeth. "Get in." We got in, Terry in the front passenger's side, where he twisted around to face us as the car pulled away from the curb, and I had tried to figure out how to arrange the cape. That's Terry, rather. "So?" Quinn rubbed her temples. "What'll it take for you to bury the picture till Tuesday? I want a clean debut." Terry nodded, obviously expecting it. "You want it dramatic? No worries. Give me the first interview." "You'll have to do the interview right after the press conference. I will be vetting your questions." Don't you trust me to know what's off limits? By now I'm hurt." "You're a journalist. You can't feel pain. I'm more worried that my associate has no experience with the wiles of the press. You know the drill. I'll be there. I'll vet the questions. And if I ask any questions you're declaring out of bounds, or go over your on-the-spot veto, that'll be the last time allowed in the dome. Yeah. You're a hard woman. You free for dinner next Friday? Get out." Tom had conveniently stopped us at a light at the dramatically appropriate moment. Terry opened the door, but looked back over his shoulder. "Someday you'll say yes. I'm not irresistible, you know." The light changed, and we pulled away, and Quinn let her head fall back on the seat headrest. Tom raised the dividing window, and looking at the glass, I realized distractedly that our ride was armored. "I've got to do it sometime, and I like Terry," I offered hesitantly. "Do you think She frowned. "You think he might recognize you?" I thought about it for a moment. I don't think so. He covers a lot of Mom's events, and he interviewed her a couple of times, but I'm mostly invisible. I don't think he'd out me if he did." She sighed in agreement. "He's no tabloid reporter, and he does know the deal." The unspoken deal. Capital D. News agencies only use the code names of superheroes who wanted to keep their private lives private, even if their private identities were publicly known. Superheroes who tried to keep their private identities secret weren't fair game for investigative journalists either. Heroes routinely and successfully sued reporters and news agencies in civil court on personal injury grounds for breaching their secret identities. The courts recognized a superhero's right to privacy and the shield of an official super identity. Well, mostly. I chewed my lip, wondering if a mask, wig, and wonder bra would really be enough. "Terry's good people. You could do worse on a Friday night, too. For that matter, what's the deal with Andrew? I've seen boys chase girls with flowers and concert tickets before, but never with costume designs." She sighed again, straightening up. "I know. I don't date." "Oh." It was a polite "oh," not really intended to go anywhere, but she looked at me. I had a boyfriend when I changed, and it didn't last. She stroked her shiny, slick smooth cheek. It squeaked, the sound of rubber on rubber. He said it felt like he was dating Barbie. I honestly had no idea how to respond to that horrifyingly personal revelation, but she didn't seem to expect me to. We drove back to the dome in silence. I kept quiet, grateful for the time to think. I still didn't know how I felt yet. Everything was happening so quickly. She probably thought I needed a few moments before what came next. With a costume, it was official, and the whole team was waiting for me when we returned to the dome. They welcomed me with a beating. Well, that's quite the cliffhanger to leave off on. We're going to take a little break before we dive into chapter 6 here. So we're going to be right back. Uh, Once again, I must stress, do not leave if the stream goes down. I'll be keeping one eye on it. In the meanwhile, now is a fantastic time to stretch, get hydrated, take any of your necessary medications, pet your pets, take care of things generally, that whole spiel. I heartily suggest if you pet your pets that you join the Discord such that you can post some pictures of your pets. I will probably be posting some pictures of Magnuson Library, along with some pictures of my dinner that delayed stream a little bit out front. In the meanwhile, Nobody Explode. We will be listening to an episode of X-1 in the interim, and we'll be back in 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Keep one eye on stream. We'll be back with more Wearing the Cape momentarily. For now, we continue our wonderful LARP, our wonderful little lark outside of the public domain, returning once more to the realm of the author permission story, and we're going to resume Wearing the Cape as we've gotten through the origin story portion of this tale, as it were, and now we're really watching this new hero blossom, as it were, as Astra struggles to find her legs, not only as a newfound hero, but also a but also a young girl struggling in the process of going to college. Anyway, chapter 7. Protesters from Citizens for Human Rights picketed the Dome this morning, this time to protest the Illinois Supreme Court decision upholding the right of superheroes to testify in court under their superhero identities, thus denying defendants the right to directly confront their accusers. A spokesperson argued no court would accept the testimony of a Klan member wearing his hood or of an anonymous source on tape or a fizzed-out screen. Why should so-called superheroes get special privileges? From the Chicago News at 5. I exaggerate, but not by much. They weren't wasting any time. I had my costume, and without a moment to breathe, I was going to meet the whole team. Atlas waited for us in uniform at the elevator. Astra, he said. He took in my new look and nodded. I approve. Right this way. Stepping aside, he ushered us into the assembly room. I'd seen them all in pictures, of course, but now I stood in a room full of the world's most famous superheroes, all in full costume and watching me. I nearly hyperventilated. Ajax and Blackstone flanked what had to be Atlas's empty chair, Ajax looming large in his black-on-black armor. Across from him, Blackstone wore his usual elegant tuxedo and opera cape, his white mustache and Van Dyke beard elegantly trimmed, dressed to take the stage for his magic act. Rush, the Sentinel's current speedster, sat on Ajax's left in his red and white racer's jumpsuit, his half-visored helmet off to expose a blonde buzz cut and surfer boy looks. Nimbus sat beside him, a luminous white hologram of a woman, surrounded by a glowing aura that fuzzed her edges and lines to softness. She looked ethereal, even angelic, but Quinn had called her the most dangerous member of the team. most dangerous member of the team. Chakra sat next to Blackstone, dressed like a vaguely Hindu tribal dancer, in a midriff-bearing red vest and skirt loaded down with lots of gold jewelry. Beneath lustrous auburn curls, her brown eyes regarded me warmly. Quinn walked around to sit on her right, and I took the empty seat beside her as Atlas took his place. I fidgeted with my cape. "Thank you all for coming," he said. Most of them smiled at me encouragingly, though Rush just looked bored. I smiled back, as nervous as a cat at a dog show. "There'll be a welcoming dinner later, and Willis assures me it'll be superb." There were chuckles all around, and he nodded to me. "I'd like everyone to welcome Astra to the team. She'll be training with us for now, and we'll be introducing her to the public. For later, who knows? Now, in a normal business, this would be the point where we all introduce ourselves, share our favorite movies, or do such damn fool get-to-know ritual, but since she already knows everything media feels fit to print about us folks, and we've all read and discussed her file, well, we can forget about all that. Some embarrassment for the new hands traditional, though, so, Astra, did you say a few words?" I jumped and then stood. Right. Thank you speech number 1 coming up. Thanks, Mom. I cleared my throat. "Only that I'm very grateful for the amazing opportunity to be working with all of you. I know this is a unique opportunity, and I'll work very hard not to let everyone down." I sat, and they applauded. "Short as a Truman speech," Ajax said approvingly. "Yep. Now I reckon," Atlas stood, "we should get down to the main event." We all trooped down the hall that led to the infirmary and gym as I wondered what was going on, but we went through the doors opposite. In all the movies I'd seen, superhero headquarters came with a high-tech training room that fired lasers and missiles, threw out traps, even created virtual reality environments to fight in. It was just a big, high-ceilinged room, completely bare except for some brightly painted red circles on the floor. Here Ajax took over. He twirled his maul end over end, caught it as lightly as a baton, and gave me the same friendly smile he had this morning. "This is our primary training room. For urban tactical training, we share an open range outside of town with the crisis aid and intervention teams, and there's a practice range down the hall for target practice. This room is strictly for drilling and sparring, and when we want to train against different threat types, we invite others in to join us." I nodded, and he continued. "We'll have plenty of time in the coming weeks to do serious training. Today, we just want to give you an idea of how we fight individually. I understand you've had some training yourself?" I swallowed. "Just the Taibo gym workout and mixed self-defense. Well, and high school field hockey." His smile widened. "Then you've at least struck someone else with intent before. Good. You're now one of the strongest superhumans in the country, and when your training's complete, you will be able to go one-on-one with any other Atlas type out there. However, you have limits." He nodded to Rush and waved me forward. I followed Rush to the middle of the room, marked by one of the red circles, and we faced each other. I hastily took a stance, palms slick inside my new gloves. "Begin." Rush bowed, and I copied him. And he kicked me, knocked me to the floor, grabbed and rolled me, tossed me out of the circle, and bowed back in the center. I stared up at him, dizzy and wide-eyed. "Done," Ajax barked. Rush's fists and feet, normal human bone and muscle under his armored gauntlets and boots, hadn't hurt me at all, but I could hardly see him move, forget about touching him. It was like a cage match between a brick and a butterfly. Ajax waved Nimbus forward, and she floated to the center as I scrambled up and returned to my position. "Begin." She flashed about the room, firing at me from each new position. Her low power shots burned, the few that missed leaving scorch marks on the wall as I desperately tried to dodge. Then she flared, bright enough to burn herself into my retinas. I blinked uselessly, blind. If she wanted to, she could burn a hole in me with a sustained megawatt laser burst without even trying. Since she was solid as a sunbeam, I couldn't touch her any more than I could touch Rush. "Done." Ajax ended it. She flashed back to the center, and we bowed again as I tried to get my breath. Blackstone multiplied himself into a dozen levitating Blackstones, all of them disappearing with a flourish and a puff of smoke. Then Harlequin just stood there, inviting me to hit her as hard as I could. When I nerved myself up to do it, I felt her bones bend as she bounced away like a super ball. Rebounding off the wall, she did spinning leaps back to the center to give us all a bow. Rush laughed, and even Atlas smiled. I flushed. When Ajax donned his helmet and marched out to stand in the center, I wanted to run. Instead, I took a shaky breath and settled into a defensive stance, weight on my back foot, fists up. I can do this.
Begin.
We bowed, and I launched myself at the far wall like the goalpost at the end of the field, through him. He folded over me with an explosive grunt as, still accelerating, I drove us both into the wall. It boomed and rebounded, and as he slid to the floor, I flew to the ceiling where I hovered, breathing hard. Everyone stood in shocked silence as he climbed to his feet and removed his helmet, and roared in a deep, booming laugh.
Done,
he shouted, applauding. He retrieved his maul.
You won't spar with Atlas today, and Chakra's psychic powers provide tactical support. I believe you've learned the lesson.
I landed, lightheaded. It's paper, scissors, rock, isn't it?
That's a simplification, but yes. Each of us has our strengths and weaknesses, and the purposes of a team. Each of us has our strengths and weaknesses, and the purposes of our team is to cover them for each other. Well done.
I flushed again as they all applauded and gathered around to shake hands like I'd passed some sort of initiation. All except for Atlas, who stood in the door with a smile that stopped with his lips. Everyone was perfectly nice, but after dinner I went back to my rooms. Mom had sent over my entire winter wardrobe, my laptop, school things, and even a big box of odds. I killed a couple of hours putting everything away the way I wanted it, until I found myself endlessly rearranging my bathroom stuff. Flopping on my bed, still in costume, I tried to think about tomorrow, and the rest of the week, and the next. It still seemed unreal, like I was an unwilling guest at one of those live-action adventure parties. No matter how much I wanted to, I couldn't break character and leave. Or maybe I'd been kidnapped by elves, dragged off to fairyland where everything was the same but different, full of magic and odd rules I had to learn around. Figured you didn't want to hear that sneeze. Anyway, I tried to remember my earlier resolve. Maybe I could click my heels 3 times and go home? My mask itched and I peeled it off. There came a knock at the door, and I scrambled to open it to find Atlas in the hall, still in costume, too. I remember reading that he'd bought a penthouse somewhere in the Loop after his divorce. Was he flying home? Are you done for the day, or you have a little time tonight? Yes, I have some time. Then I'd like to show you something. Put your mask back on. He took me up another elevator, a secure one that didn't stop at the ground floor atrium, and we stepped out into a bay as big as a 5-car garage. Racks of pallets lined the walls, and at the push of a button, the ceiling opened. It was a launch bay for flyers like us, complete with loads of emergency equipment. Now he grinned. Try to keep up. I started as he launched himself through the bay doors and then leaped after him. He got a good head start, and without my new supervision, I'd have lost him as he climbed straight up into the night sky. My ears didn't pop as we raced upward, but the whistle of air thinned, and I lost sight of him in the clouds. But he wasn't trying to get away. When I broke through the cloud layer, he was waiting for me. As I floated up beside him, that's really what it felt like I was a floating, self-directed balloon. He smiled, a genuine smile this time. Look around. I did, and gasped in delight. The clouds below weren't thick, so the lights of Chicago lit them from beneath. We seemed to be floating above a sea of pearlescent fog. Then he pointed up. Undimmed by the lights of the city and the denser air below, the Milky Way stretched above us in a great celestial arc, impossibly bright, surrounded by more stars than I'd ever known existed. I blinked and felt tears cooling my cheeks, but I didn't care. It was beautiful. I thought you should see this, before you spend too much time down there in the mud, the blood. Everything that gets taken from you, well, you get a few things too. Thank you. I watched the clouds drift. Atlas. Hmm? About the tea time anarchist. Oh. What? I wondered when you'd ask. Every crisis aid and intervention team in Chicago's on alert. All of us are in the dome. Why do you think I'm still in uniform? Even if we got the call tonight, you wouldn't be with us. You're a trainee. No skills despite that stunt you pulled on Ajax. But we should be hunting him? No. Feds are doing that. A lot more resources than we have. Blackstone's our team intelligence specialist. He's got no leads. We're not gods, Astra. We're glorified emergency response professionals, rescue workers, civilian contractors to the police. When other superhumans are involved, half the time all we get to do is clean up. Leave counterterrorism to the pros. Go to that party tomorrow. Say goodbye to your friends. Next week we'll get serious. Come back inside when you're ready. Dome will be open. And he dropped out of sight, leaving me alone above the pearl bright sea. Now we move into Act 2. So this book is written in 4 parts, which really I think I'm I'm consistently surprised at how many books take the multi-part structure. You know what I mean? Like, it makes sense, especially in a story like this, to have a multi-part structure going, but it's still no less of a surprise when it goes, oh, part 2. When we see this, it almost calls back to a lot of the serialized content we've been reading in the public domain of late. It's especially appropriate, I feel like, for this story because superheroes have been through and through a comics medium at the end of the day, and so like having those stories have always been serialized, even if I prefer to read them in the big trade paperbacks when they're a little less serialized. They've started out that way, and it really has left a thumbprint on the genre. So it kind of makes sense for this to kind of, break itself up into smaller arcs and parts. Anyway, now that I've wandered off topic for a couple minutes. Actually, you know what? Well, while I'm off topic, come to think of it, I want to promote a couple things. Because, I'm allowed to do that. That's a thing that I have within my power. I can just promote things. I can just be like, oh yeah, by the way, I do other stuff. It's true. I do other stuff. I have a YouTube channel where you can catch up on the show. I've been slowly but surely trickling out VODs again. That's always handy. The live captions that you see on the Twitch stream also apply to the YouTube VOD. If you're having trouble with the captions in the most recent set of videos, I am not sure that all of the captions uploaded correctly, so if you are having troubles, feel free to ping me in Discord about that. I'm pretty sure I have the captions uploaded, but also the captions use the same API that YouTube uses for their automated captions, so it's a little hard for me to tell sometimes. What else? Oh yeah, this is a podcast if you prefer an audio-only format, edited of various interruptions, such as the one that is occurring right this second. Um, Never mind. My cynicism was not rewarded. I thought the internet was going to conk out for another minute, a couple minutes there, but no. Uh, if you would so chosen to, find yourself in a version of the show that is audio only and less interrupted, the podcast feed is fantastic for that. Yeah, that's about it. I could promote more, but I think I want to get back on topic here and start in on part 2, Chapter 8. Miraculous powers have not made the world a more peaceful place. Governments, whether liberal democracies or totalitarian governments, whether liberal democracies or totalitarian oligarchies, rest upon a monopoly of force or threat of force, and history has shown us what happens when significant centers of non-government force emerge. Insurrections, civil wars, criminal oligarchies, warlords, terrorist movements. The results are all around us. China fragmented into a cluster of Chinese states. North Korea collapsed completely. Radical Islamists carved the caliphate out of the Muslim states of the Middle East and nearly wiped out Israel before they were stopped. Mexico fights an ongoing civil war with supervillain-led drug cartels. The event has forever broken the monopoly on force, says Professor Charles Gibbons in The New Heroic Age. Thursday started with the press conference. Quinn and Al directed it, moved me about, and had me give a short statement, a repeat of my little speech the day before. I hoped the media saw a confident new superheroine instead of a scared girl playing dress-up. After the supervised interview Quinn had promised Terry, she handed me off to Ajax for my first training session. It wasn't at all what I expected. Instead of going right to the fight training, Ajax started me on what he called resistance training. He didn't mean bodybuilding. He meant teaching me how to react to everything using less effort. Much less. I'd done pretty well the past few days, just not hurting anybody or doing any damage. Well, except for the warped steering wheel, burst pillow, shattered cup. It really just felt like everything around me was made of tissue, thin plaster sheet, or cardboard. And, well, people, Ajax said, they were just as breakable. I had to learn to move safely through a fragile world, and our first session had made me completely paranoid. But I had to do the gallery event. It was my show, my last chance to see the bees before leaving town, my last day, really, of remotely normal life. I conferred with Susan through the day, went over the lists one more time, and made sure the gallery had good insurance. They could hardly lock me in the dome, but Ajax made me promise to eat off napkins instead of plates, be very careful shaking hands, and just don't make any sudden moves. A lot of Chinatown burned the day of the event, and the renewal brought serious gentrification, so the Silk Road Art Gallery just stood down the street from the Puitok Center in a shiny new outdoor mall designed to look like a street in ancient China. The night's charitable donations were going to build health clinics and water treatment plants for villages in Anhui, China's poorest successor state. President Touches Clouds had continued the East Asia Marshall Plan launched by President Kale, and private charities were a big part of it. The event would also bring a lot of upscale attention to the gallery and the shops around it, so the entire mall was hung with hundreds of paper lanterns. Uet's next door had agreed to provide incredible Cantonese delicacies for our guests, and the Shanhong's book across the mall was supplying the heirloom musician and wonderful teas. Oh man, I want some wonderful teas. Don't get me started on tea, we'll be here all night, but I am a known enjoyer of high quality tea. Oh, excuse me. I need to eat something a little spicier to clear up my nose. I'd vowed to be no touchy, but Annabeth practically clotheslines me when I crossed the gallery's threshold at 7. She pulled me into a hug, and I froze as we narrowly missed knocking an ivory figurine to the floor. Holding me at arm's length, she and the rest of the bees gave my little green cocktail dress a once-over. I bought it for the party, and it had an empire waist with a ribbon round the front to define my hint of a bust. She gave it her critical approval, and hugged me again. "Oh my gosh," she enthused. "This party's amazing." Megan rolled her eyes while Julie laughed. Dane loomed beside them, there squiring Annabeth. They'd been together since freshman year when she'd started dating him because he was a jock, and they made a match set. I expected them to grill me the moment I walked in, and looking at them, I narrowed my eyes. "Okay, this is nice, but you're all a little too happy for the room. What's going on?" Dane laughed. I scored front row seats for us at the Freak Zone concert. Oh yeah, that'd do it. Freak Zone, led by the metamorphing supervillain Freak Show, supervillain in air quotes there, was the latest megastar rapper group, and all three otherwise sane girls were deeply into villain rap. Burnout was so last decade. Okay, this is one of the other concepts that I was like, oh, the intersection of superheroes and celebrity. This is a really good one. I'm gonna keep going so you all can enjoy it too. Hey, I got six. Would you like to come? Dane, do I look like I listen to villain rap? I don't know. Still waters. I shook my head. Why? You're as vanilla as I am. You're not into it, and I have no idea why they are. Hello, we're right here, Megan said. Dane ignored her. I think it's a transgressive thing. Mostly for the style. Okay. He was a smart jock. Annabeth stuck out her tongue at him. Hope you've gotta come. No, nine, no, yet, nine, and again, no. I'd rather go shark diving with 100 paper cuts, but it's awfully nice of you. Maybe that means you don't want these. Silently blessing Mom for her suggestion, I handed each of them the early invitations for the Foundation's Christmas ball. I even had one for Dane. I'd expected Annabeth to deliver. Although most people on the guest list were public figures, big money, Mom liked to salt the crowd with some beautiful, young, and connected people, as well as some purely entertaining ones. The bees checked all those boxes. They already had plans to violently assault the fashion world together after graduation, and their families were old Chicago money. Dane, serious eye candy himself, was being groomed to take over his dad's defense contracting company if they could tear him away from soccer, where he'd already been accepted on the UFC team. The invitations elicited a round of shrieks. The Christmas ball was legendary. I took a deep breath. Now I had to tell them. I opened my mouth, but before I could say anything, Julie leaned over and whispered in my ear, scanning the room. Guess who's here already? Miss Laurie. What? No! I looked around frantically, wanting to check everything again, despite all my preparations, and spotted Mom across the room talking to Father Nolan, our own little priest and pastor of St. Chris. She'd obviously just handed him a plate of food, which he regarded in polite bemusement. All women felt the irresistible urge to feed the hapless man. One reason for his slightly spherical shape, I was sure. Then I spotted Miss Laurie in conversation with Rush, of all people. My small world was getting smaller. Miss Laurie was one of Chicago's grand dames, and Mom's main rival in the charitable events business. She hosted only the most elite affairs, but always came to Mom's, probably hoping to catch her using black magic or something. I often thought she had no wrinkles because her closely knotted steel-gray hair pulled her face too tight. Giving air kisses all round, I abandoned the bees and wove my way through the crowd, trying not to touch anybody. Arriving at her side safely, I sighed of relief. Now I just had to face the dragon. Miss Laurie? I curtsied. I couldn't help it. She always stood poker straight. When she looked at me, I knew she was doing a quick and critical inspection. She interrupted a conversation with Rush, out tonight in an evening suit with his newest wife. Tracy? Probably on Ajax's instructions. Beside them stood a little Buddha of a man I didn't recognize. No worries, Altier. My internet has also been contributing to the constant buffering, so it's not just on your end. Unfortunately, my internet is not super healthy tonight, which I'm certainly not upset about. No way, no. Well, what gave you that idea? But I appreciate. Example number one. I did not want you to. I did not want you to demonstrate, computer. Alas. Lapier's having a little trouble this evening. I genuinely think I might need to run to Best Buy for an Ethernet cable this week. And just, keep the internet dish idea under my hat. But, where was I? I had a thought in my head and I lost it. There we are. There you are, dear. You don't rush and Stacy, but I'd like you to meet Dr. Royce. The good doctor heads the neurosurgery unit at Holy Cross. Hope's the daughter of our hostess and an indispensable help to her mother. It's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Royce said, briefly clasping my hand. And I must thank your mother for her donation. The Faith Corrigan wing will be completed on schedule because of it. I banished my frown, but not before Miss Laurie spotted it. I took a breath. I needed to focus. Thank you, Doctor. I'll relay your sentiments if you aren't able to find her in this crush. What do you think of the gallery? It's amazing. I thought all the ivory not in museums was badly carved imitation. Well, it's true that new ivory is comparatively rare, but the best artists still work in it. What you're looking at, what you're looking at though, isn't ivory, Doctor. It's white jade. The doctor had been gazing at my favorite piece, the center of the collection, an amazingly lifelike figure of a beautiful Asian woman, nearly 4 feet tall and carved in purest white jade. She wore Chinese imperial robes, her head bare and hair loose in a flowing Western style, carved so fine you expected to see strands wave when you breathed. She held a sleeping infant in the crook of her left arm, and a parrot with a pearl in its mouth perched on her right hand. She watched her child, mouth curved in an adoring smile, and the parrot gazed at her rapturously. This is a modern, non-traditional representation of Kuan Yin, the Chinese goddess of mercy. Taoists worship her as an immortal, Buddhists as a bodhisattva, and the Japanese as Kannon, one of the celestial kami. Asian Christians have noted her striking resemblance to the Virgin Mary, and secret Christians in Japan prayed to her as Mary for several centuries. This beautiful piece is a syncretic representation of her in that spirit. I reached up, but stopped myself from touching her milky robes. In China, superhumans benefited with beneficial powers are said to be kissed by Kuan Yin. She's beautiful. Dr. Royce lifted his hand too, then lowered it, clearing his throat. I played tour guide for several other pieces before Mrs. Laurie brought a new arrival to his attention, and he reluctantly excused himself. A very bored Rush and Stacy found their own excuses, and I seized the chance to cautiously grab a napkin and some finger food from a passing tray. Mrs. Laurie graced me with a dry smile. Thank you for not biting his head off, dear. I'm sorry. I still don't think Faith's name belongs on a hospital building. I hung my head. On the children's wing, it just seems like the most important thing about her is she died. It is the name of the foundation, dear. In any case, I think you've made a sale. I would not be surprised if your goddess ended up in the new wing. That made me smile. Kuan Yin certainly belonged where she would comfort many, instead of delighting only the buyer. Also, on the note of my internet cutting out, if you have missed any of this, there is a VOD produced by Twitch that continues to exist for, I believe it's 2 weeks now that I'm affiliate. It used to be woefully short, and eventually it will drop on YouTube. I tend to keep the Discord very updated in regards to what's coming out when. So if you don't want to juggle quite so many limes keeping track of this subscription feed and that subscription feed and this subscription feed, the Discord's a really great place where I concentrate all of my content, as it were. Oh, and while I'm promoting off promoting content, the YouTube has been slowly catching up. Oh, excuse me. I really hope these aren't hiccups. The YouTube has been catching up on VODs, and I'm actually going to let it get ahead of the podcast feed. I think trying to keep it in sync with the podcast feed has gotten me very, very behind. So I'm just gonna let it go. So that's kind of the trade-off there. If you would like the YouTube, you can get content a little earlier on YouTube than through the podcast feed, but the podcast feed is edited to sound a bit more polished. Anyway, where was I? And perhaps when you're a director on the Foundation board, you can put Faith's name on a few schools. I choked on the delicious bao yu I'd just bitten into. That was what Mom wanted, what I had wanted. Now I saw a huge fight looming. Suddenly the bao yu didn't taste so good. Oh, honestly, Mrs. Laurie, I'm already thinking about staying in school for graduate studies. She snorted. Too much knowledge rots the brain, unless it's the practical sort, such as how to fix my car or operate on my heart. Sometimes I think the more educated a person becomes, the more useless he is to the rest of us. I can't bear to speak to half of my grandchildren because of their intellectual pretensions. I will strive not to be useless. That earned me another sharp look. See that you do. Your mother infuriates me. She ignores half the rules of society and mocks the rest, yet everyone forgives her. Worst, she throws common affairs like tonight's and expects everyone to come, and they do. She could auction manure in stables and need help carrying the cash away. She smiled thinly. And if you do not live up to her achievements, well, I'll be sorely disappointed. With that, she took her leave, leaving me standing beside Kuan Yin in mute astonishment. The event was a success, and I got to spend some time with the bees between my hosting duties, but I wasn't able to tell them. There were moments when I could have, but I kept chickening out, feeling guilty as sin. Oh, by the way, my cancer might have come back. I'm flying out to get experimented on at Johns Hopkins. No, I couldn't lie to their faces and accept their sympathy. Driving back to the dome, I decided to meditate on it with a soak in the amazing tub that came with a shower, then curl up with super poo to start on one of the training manuals Ajax had given me. Solutions always seemed to come when I did something else. I got the bath, but before I could get to studying, the tea time anarchist shot me. I love the chapter cliffhangers. I love the chapter cliffhangers in this book. I mean this in the best way. In case you're watching, Mr. Harmon, um, I mean this in the best way. They remind me of Goosebumps a little bit. Um, just that sense of like the bottom dropping out from under the book just for a moment right at the end of the chapter, and then we pick back up with kind of like a little bit of a hand wave from from the main character, like, oh no 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 no, well, about that. It's like I love it, it's so good. And it kind of makes things feel like a little bit serialized almost, which again works really well. I think that's like an intentional dynamic that's being played into here. You know, that sense of like, oh, the issue is ending. What's gonna happen next week? Oh yeah, about that. You know, it feels very like it feels especially suited to like an older age of comics. You know what I mean? Like it. You know, Bronze Age comics did not lean on that quite so hard. I say as if Bronze Age comics did not start with the death of Superman, but you get my point. Also, another thing, is it called the Bronze Age? Have we decided on like 90s into 2000s comics being called the Bronze Age of comics? Or like have we decided to call it like something else like the Gravel Age? Because that was all really really gritty. You know, think about like all the Liefelian influences that we're now seeing in our adaptations because they finally percolated through. I've never really kept up with like the academic nomenclature on things because it's like if you think about it, you've got Golden Age comics, you know, all of the like clickbait Superman, Jimmy Olsen things. You got Silver Age comics where it's like Crisis, it's like Crisis on Infinite Earths, you know, all of the original multiverse stuff, you know, Jack Kirby's New Gods and stuff like that. And then like we have uh, and then like following that, do we have the Bronze Age, like the death of Superman, you know, uh, Dark Knight,
Oh, what's the one I'm thinking of? It's like the one where Batman's like built like a brick wall and he's way too gritty about things. Dark Knight Returns, something like that. Like all of the Batman versus Superman type stuff and like Guy Gardner and everything having very like aggressive edge. You know, the type of thing I made fun of last time we played Wearing the Mask, that solo RPG about superheroes. Speaking of RPGs about superheroes, did you know this is a campaign setting for Fate? This book that we're reading right now, people, I believe the author and several other people worked on making this a Fate compatible setting. And genuinely, now that I know that, that might get me to pick up Fate. I've been tiptoeing around picking up Fate because I have 5 million other RPGs on my shelf, but this might get me to. And I'm always a sucker for telling stories in a setting that I like. Anyway, Magnus, can we hey, kitty, can we not dig? Thank you. Anyway, chapter 9. Hindu scholars came Hindu scholars claim that the world has entered the next Vedic age. Many Shia and Sufi Muslims believe the event a sign of the appearance of the Mahdi. The Catholic Church has declared the event a mystery, capital M, while many fundamentalist Christian sects consider it a sign of the end times. Scientists have no idea, although multiverse theory suggests some possibilities. The Awakened believe that the event is evidence that the universe as we know it is a virtual reality inside of a hypercomputer. Most of us are simulations, and somebody changed the reality settings. Professor Charles Gibbons, the new heroic age. I was not well. The first and last time I drank hard liquor had been when Shelley and I wasted a bottle of her parents' finest scotch on a Friday night while her parents were in New York. I hadn't liked the taste, got drunk too fast to enjoy it, and woke up the next morning wishing I'd tripped on the stairs during the night and broken my neck, because then I'd been dead and wouldn't have to worry about it. Sorry about the head, a cultured New England voice said. A neural disruptor might be the ultimate taser, but set too high, it'll make you wish you'd never been born. I don't know that I have a cultured New England accent in me. Well, we'll just give this man the accent that I just gave him because that's actually how I read this as a teen. One of the few mental voices for these characters that's actually in my range. I opened my eyes and saw short, dark curls and a serious gray gaze in the face of a tired angel who needed a shave. I remembered getting out of the bath, drying off, and throwing on my UFC t-shirt and drawstring shorts, walking into my new bedroom, and getting shot by a very apologetic intruder. How had I not heard him? Then, nothing. One moment a man with the face of a mournful saint stood there pointing something at me, then the resemblance of single malts passed. I hurt so bad I could barely think. I looked down at myself, lying on my bed, wearing what I'd thrown on, but also some kind of weird jewelry? Stylish bands of braided silver wires, set with thin green jewel-toned discs, circled each wrist and ankle. I tried to focus through the thundering pain behind my eyes. What was going on? I'm sure you can't put two thoughts together. Again, I apologize. You shot me, I managed. Every twitch made me nauseous, and each syllable echoed in my head like stone bells. Yes, I did, but now that you're awake, I can do this. He pulled out a quarter-sized disc and stuck it to my forehead, and between one ragged breath and the next, the pain flowed away. Now I could think, which meant I could be scared. I tried to sit up, and the jewelry wouldn't cooperate. He backed up as I struggled with rising hysteria. Putting enough fear-driven effort into it to toss a bus, I hardly moved at all. He simply waited, and, early hyperventilating, I fell back. Somehow the bands held me down as securely as any set of anchored blacklock cuffs could have, and no matter how I wrenched at them, my arms and legs wouldn't move. Giving up, I struggled for calm. Then I screamed.
He didn't even flinch from the ear-rattling decibels. "I've erected a battlefield in the room," he said, pulling my computer chair up beside the bed. "Sorry." He wore a long evening coat, cream-colored with a soft texture that looked almost like velvet, over gray slacks and a shirt with a darker vest and tie. It all went together, but even in my fear I thought the cut looked strange. "First," he said in that cultured voice, "I'm going to tell you 4 things. You're not in danger. I'm a time traveler. I'm the tea-time anarchist. And I'm not who you think I am." He didn't move when I tried to lunge at him, the green discs on my wrists and ankles flashing bright enough to turn the room green. I pushed so hard my vision went red and fuzzy as I struggled silently. Finally, I stopped, nearly sobbing with the frustration. He watched me settle again, smiling sadly. "I'll start with the last point first," he continued as if nothing had happened. "I'm not the man who killed Senator Davis along with the other unfortunate victims of the Ashland bombing. There's no reason for you to believe me, of course, so we'll return to that later. As for the second point, I offer the restraining bands you're wearing and the neural disruptor I used on you as evidence I've been to the future. We both know today that to do the job with the best restraints available on hand today, it'd require 100-pound titanium cuffs anchored in concrete. Do you agree?" He stopped and waited for my response. "Yes," I said, still breathing hard. I would have agreed with him if he declared himself a teapot. Keep him talking. If he's talking, he's not doing anything else. "Very good. I'll be able to provide more proof later, but that will have to do for the moment. Now, let me state that time travel is impossible, at least time travel of the sort most described in fiction. To illustrate, have you heard of the grandfather paradox?" I shook my head. Uh, Oh, well, a suicidal time traveler decides to rewrite history so he never existed. So he travels back in time to shoot his grandfather before his father's conceived, making sure he himself is never born. Will it work? Do you see the obvious problem? Focus, focus, play his game, I thought hard, ignoring the screaming in my head. "It doesn't make sense," I finally said, hoping I had it right. "I think if he killed his own grandfather and was never born, then who killed his grandfather?" He smiled like I answered a question for the class. "Exactly. The grandfather paradox demonstrates history must be fixed and unchangeable. It's a matter of cause and effect. Scientists have tried to argue that time travel remains possible by postulating 2 theories." He settled back as I pulled in my flying thoughts. "One is the observer effect. This theory states that once something is observed to happen, it can't unhappen. You can visit the past, but all of your actions are already part of the history. You can't change anything. But why can't you? The theory breaks down to a circular argument for fate. If history is fixed, then all of time, past and future, is fixed. There's no privileged present when free will is possible, since your present is a future time traveler's past. There can only be a smooth continuum of fated progression from the beginning of time to its end, no deviations allowed. The other, of course, is multiverse theory, which in this context states with any event for which 2 or more possible actions exist, both actions take place, and each action creates its own universe. There could be universes in which Hitler remained a commercial painter instead of reading the Third Reich. A time traveler in this scenario could go back, change the past all he liked. He would simply be creating another universe with a separate history rather than changing his own." He paused to make sure I was keeping up, and I nodded quickly. "I hope you all are keeping up. Good luck out there." But these are pretty elementary level science fiction concepts to me, so I'm just like, oh yeah, of course. I even knew 99% of this reading the book the first time. It's the next bit that the expansion on the basic concept of the next one that was the surprise for me reading this. "Very good. There is, however, a third theory which expresses the reality of time travel. Are you familiar with Schrodinger's cat? It's a little thought experiment involving a cat in a box that isn't really dead or alive until you open the box to look at it. No? It was intended to point out the problem with the theory of quantum superposition. A scientist puts a cat in a box with a vial of poison that'll be broken by a trigger that'll be tripped only if a particle of the radioactive isotope also in the box decays. A quantum theory states that until the outcome is observed, the particle both has and hasn't decayed, and therefore the cat is both alive and dead until the scientist, the observer, looks in the box. Now he leaned in, and I tried to curl up to get away. Time, he said, ignoring my flinch, behaves according to what I call the principle of temporal superposition. The future is a tangle of infinite possibilities existing simultaneously, which collapse to a single actuality as the present, the moment we're in now, and it advances second by second into the future. Free will exists here at the point of collapse, where each decision is actually made. Trailing the present, the past is fixed. It can be visited, but not changed. The future can be visited and interacted with, but is unfixed and indeterminate. When I visit the future, I'm only visiting the most likely future that would unfold from my moment of departure. It was like being lectured by my favorite teacher. My heart still raced, but the more he talked, the less I was scared he'd hurt me. I even found myself desperately interested in what he was trying to tell me. If he wasn't crazy, then maybe I was safe. Causality is preserved at each point. Now you're going to tell me you're the tea time anarchist, but not the man who's killing people? I almost bit my tongue. Don't confront him. If you're ready. I nodded shakily. It would be more accurate to say that I'm the first tea time anarchist, as it were. You've read my manifesto. My predictions were observations of what I'd seen in the future. By 2028, a totalitarian government will be in power, using superhumans to control the rest of the population. I wrote the manifesto, hoping the warning would be enough, and when it wasn't, I began my career as a goad, a prankster of sorts. My plan was to discredit the government badly enough to prevent it from taking absolute power, and I succeeded, but only temporarily. I don't understand. I revisited 2028 to find the totalitarian figure again in place, this time by a slightly different historical route. That's when I began paying much closer attention to how future events play out, and I realized that many of the changes occurring couldn't have been caused by me. Even second or third hand, the dominoes shouldn't have fallen in that direction. Then came the first bombing that I claimed credit for, that government office in Portland. When I went back to observe the bomber, what do you think I found? I really, really tried. I have no idea. Simply, the bomb had been set by another time traveler. He did it the same way I got in here tonight. I simply went back to when the dome was under construction and didn't have any real security yet, found this room, and returned to the present. I'd expected to find you sleeping, by the way. So there's a second time traveler, and his goals are the opposite of my own. Remember that. Leaning in too fast for me to react, he tapped the pain-killing disc he stuck to my forehead I'd completely forgotten about, and that was that. Yeah, that concept of the past being a fixed space that never changes, and the essentially many worlds interpretation of the future. There being many futures has been bandied about a lot in many things written, but between this and Dune, it really stuck to me, and it's admittedly a way that I really like to look at things. You know, there are many futures out there, and we don't know which ones we're getting. uh, we can probably guess at which one's most likely, but we don't know which one we're getting. I mean, a vacuum. What's it called? Oh, the thing where everything goes down a power level or something, like a vacuum collapse. That could be coming, and we have no idea. See, now I gotta look up the name of that before we start the next chapter. Vacuum field collapse, is that what it's called? Vacuum decay. That's what I'm thinking of. Heads up if you have trouble with things like Roko's basilisk, things of an apocalyptic nature, that you have no idea um, could be coming or not, close your ears for the next 30 seconds. So vacuum decay in a nutshell is essentially the universe is at a specific state, and we live our lives in that specific state. And the concept of vacuum decay is essentially posits the idea that the universe at large is in a state called a false vacuum, where it seems stable, but something could, essentially flick a cosmic domino at us, and all of the dominoes would start to tumble, and we would have no idea it was coming, and then very suddenly the state of all the matter around us, the bottom would drop out of it because the false vacuum is no more, and there we go, we're gone. Anyway, you can come back now. Unmute, please. Unmute. we're done with the vacuum decay. I figured I'd warn you, some people have trouble with things like Roko's basilisk, which, by the way, if you have trouble with that, if you had trouble with the concept of vacuum decay, don't look up Roko's basilisk. It's a whole thing. I personally don't mind. I would talk about it till I'm blue in the face. It's just a fun thought experiment for me, but some people have trouble with it. Anyway, chapter 10. The problem with dealing with time travelers is that they're nearly omniscient. They can discover anything known in the past or future just by going and having a look. Tell me how you keep a secret from someone who can peek whenever they like. You have to assume that everything you do is completely transparent. Astra, Notes from a Life. I woke in the morning with a lurch. That dream had been way too real. Then I realized that under the blanket I wore my t-shirt and shorts and saw the neatly folded letter on the nightstand by my bed. Picking it up, I opened it like I was lifting the cover on a bomb. Dear Astra, it read, I hope you'll forgive my method of introduction last night, but I felt it best to be safe. I realize that nothing I've said or shown you's real proof of my claims. After all, a gadgeteering Vern typewriter could easily be responsible for the restraints and other items you saw last night. I rubbed my wrists. I would have liked to have taken you for a time trip as proof. Alas, I cannot carry anything bigger than a bread box with me on my journeys. In any case, I don't think you would have been a cooperative passenger. Instead, below you will find a list of events that will take place should you follow your routine for today. We shall talk more later if you wish. If you do not, all you need to do is share last night's conversation with your teammates. Below it was a list. Your mother will call at 7:05. Quinn will join you for breakfast. Dr. Mendel will give you a clean bill of mental health, and so on throughout the day. My cell launched into Ode to Joy, and I bit back a shriek. I was just that wigged out. It was 7:05, and Mom was calling to see how I was doing. My response, I'm okay, while trying not to cry, set off her mom radar, and she asked what was wrong. Where could I possibly start? Everything. A mask is a necessary fashion accessory. I can't lie to my friends. A probably psychotic time traveler dropped by last night. I want to come home. I picked the last item. Surprisingly, one of the biggest. It's not like I hadn't been away from home before. There'd been summer camps, and I'd been expecting to move on campus in just a couple of weeks, but then I'd expected to be with my friends, and now I didn't even know when I could go home, even for a weekend. Mom just clucked sympathetically and drama checked me. There wasn't any reason she and Dad couldn't drop by the dome through the back door. It's not like we need pre-approved visitation times, dear. Before we hung up, she calendared 3 lunches and 3 dinners over the next couple of weeks. She also asked if I could talk to a couple of the Sentinels about some events coming up. I had to smile. That was Mom. Hanging up, I felt 1,000,000 pounds lighter. I didn't even mind knowing that Dad would take advantage of the dinners to press me to settle for being a safe reservist once my training ended. After a few more minutes' talk, I was able to get up and shower. I decided to tell Atlas everything, but first I had to test the letter. Andrew had sent over several spares for my costume, along with mask cleaner and instructions, and I dressed quickly before heading down the hall to the common dining area. Willis kept the pantry stocked with healthy cereals and a selection of breakfast breads, and the fridge had juice, milk, fruit, anything else I could want. I downed a bowl of oatmeal and fruit and milk, and was half finished when Quinn walked in with a planner in her hand. I inhaled my cereal and spent a minute coughing. She had a full day planned. First, they had to satisfy the team's insurance company. They required a psychiatrist's statement that I wasn't an unacceptable risk likely to twist anyone's head off because of issues. Then she needed to introduce me to a military recruiter flying out just to meet me. Like all other crisis aid and intervention teams, including us, Chicago had 8, the Sentinels were part of the state militia system. We were under the command of the governor of Illinois in civil emergencies, not part of the U.S. military, but good relations were important, so they needed to give the recruiter his chance to pitch me. The day followed the schedule the Tea Time anarchist left for me. He could have gotten some of it, like Dr. Bendel and Lieutenant Dahmer, from access to the team's computers. Whole different nightmare if he had, mind you. But lots of it was like Mom's phone call, unscheduled stuff. I got dizzy trying to figure out how even a time traveler could know everything about my day. Did he have super sneaky future tech bugs watching me? What? I never figured it out, but by the end of the day, the last line of the letter, we'll talk more later, didn't make me want to run screaming. I forgot my resolve to tell Atlas. In hindsight, things might have gone better if I had. When I got back to my rooms that night, I found an undelivered FedEx envelope on my nightstand, a kind of stiff cardboard envelope used for mailing computer disks. Opening it, I found a computer disk with a note stuck to it. I thought you might like to have this. The disc was labeled with a flower sticker with SP-15 scribbled on it. My hand started to shake. It was the home movie of the last sleepover. I'd thrown it out on the day of the funeral. Now I held it in my hand. I don't remember skinning out of my costume and into an athletic shirt and sweats. A joke gift from Megan, a lily pad green shirt with a cartoon frog and Kiss the Girl printed on it. I watched the movie twice. Then I got up and brought Super Poo down from his place in the closet to join me on the apartment couch as I relived the night again with its games, dares, and jokes on the boys. Shelley was as amazing as I remembered. I'd just started into the fourth viewing when, between one second and the next, the anarchist appeared by the apartment door. It looked like the stop-and-go photography they used on old TV shows. He wasn't there, and then he was. I paused the recording so that I could give him my full attention. Care to join me? He relaxed, but stayed where he was, with his hands in his coat pockets, and probably one foot in the past, looking ready to leap back as if I so much as leaned in his direction. Despite the sudden tension, my lips twitched with a smile. A time traveler who doesn't know what's going to happen next? I can't see the consequences of my actions till I've taken them any more than you can. I just get to see them sooner. If anything, he looked more tired than he had last night. So, what are you going to do? Tomorrow, I'm going to light a candle and call Shelley's mom. Thank you. Are you ready to listen? I nodded, guardedly. My copycat has been killing in my name, trying to trigger a political backlash that'll create the police state in my manifesto. He killed that Senator Davis because the senator was too radical too soon, made people nervous, but dead, he's a martyr and a bloody shirt for his supporters to wave. His attacks are getting worse, and he'll kill as many as he has to get the future that he wants. He needs to be stopped. He pulled a small jewelry box from his left pocket and tossed it to me. I caught it. Open it. A pearl nestled inside. It's future technology, the same kind that made your restraining cuffs. You can swallow it and it'll attach itself to your digestive tract and nervous system, until activated. You can't be serious. I am. It's undetectable. Once triggered, it'll dissolve and be flushed out. I'll show you how to trigger it, and when you do, it'll send out a pulse that will allow me to zero in on your location instantly through any kind of interference. It'll also short out all unshielded technology in your immediate area. Activating it would kill anyone not as tough as you are, so it has to be you. You trigger the beacon, and I'll be there to do what needs to be done. I should also add that if you try to have it analyzed, it'll simply break down into inert particles. I took it out. It looked so harmless sitting in my palm, but it scared me. You think your copycat will come after me? I know he will. From his perspective, he made you. Astra doesn't exist in any future before the Ashland bombing. Now that you do, future you's getting in the way of his plans. I know him well enough to know that you fascinate him, and that he'll try to enlist you before you become too big a problem. That will be our chance. I have to stop him one way or another. I shook my head in denial. Hope. His grey eyes were sad, haunted even. This man has killed dozens of people to put the future on the track he wants. If I can't stop him, he'll kill many, many more. Whatever his motives, he can't be allowed to continue. I rolled the little sphere between my fingers and tried to think. How's it happening now? I'm sorry? The future. Who's winning? Right now, it looks like a draw. His Washington players are mostly all in place, and the national safety movement is getting traction. You've seen their protesters outside the Dome, but I've managed to link the new populist movement up with the localists, and the American Civil Liberties Union is slipping into bed with the New Federalist Society and other constitutional conservatives. Other events are eventuating. Metaphorically speaking, I've been flapping my wings in Dallas to generate a perfect storm in Washington. It should arrive just on time for next year's election season. After that, his core conspiracy will have no political power left, if any, and if I can remove him from the picture, they probably won't recover. Drawing my legs up, I rested my chin on my knees. You make it sound like a political campaign. He smiled without humor. Since the U.S. is still a republic, that's exactly what it is. If it becomes something else, well, I've failed. Pulling out a notepad, he tore up the top page and handed it to me. If you need to get in touch with me, post this in the Chicago Times online. I read it and laughed. It was a Lonely Hearts personal ad. I'd be looking for the perfect man. Why do you trust me? Because I've seen 100 of your lifetimes, and in none of them do you break a trust. Wow, what could you say to that? And if I say no? He held up a green gem, the one he'd stuck to my head last night. I squeeze this and you're out again. Instant narcolepsy. It's tuned to your brainwaves now. And when you wake up, you won't have any memories tagged to me from the last 2 days. I couldn't help it. I looked at the TV screen. His expression softened. I'll leave the disc. You'll just never know where it came from. He told me how to activate the beacon when the time came, then left the same way he arrived. I sat hugging Super Poo and staring at the frozen image of Shelley and me. Why hadn't I said no? I had only 2 real options now. I could trust him and swallow the beacon, if that's what it was, or take it to Blackstone along with the unbelievable story of the last 24 hours and see if he'd told the truth about it being impervious to analysis. Sitting cross-legged on the couch, I rested my chin on Pooh's head and tried to think. I am only a bear with a very little brain, said Super Pooh. If the beacon was really something else, some exotic poison meant to kill me, or a tracking device that had allowed the anarchist to monitor me intimately, like he couldn't do that already. He could have force-fed it to me after knocking me out, and I would have never known about it. So he had to be telling the truth, at least as far as needing my active cooperation. It could, I suppose, actually be a bomb, but he'd picked me, he said, because I would survive. If that wasn't true, he could have picked anybody he knew his nemesis would target. It didn't have to be me. I thought about his sad eyes. I couldn't imagine him being ruthless enough to trick me into becoming a bomber. I turned it every which way, but at least that part felt right. He'd gone through a lot of trouble to talk to me and left the decision in my hands. I even owed him. He'd given me a gift more precious than gold, which took the second option off the table. I didn't think he was lying. He'd extended his trust. He was right. I couldn't betray it. Not without cause, anyway. But could I go along with his plan? Not tell the team I'd become bait in a trap? Would it be the right thing? Could I really be that important? I rolled the little sphere in my hand, chilled by the thought. I'd barely gotten my costume, but he'd probably seen years of future me in action. I tried to imagine what future me was like. I'd come back to the first question. Take it now, decide whether or not to use it later. Best case, I wouldn't have to. Worst case, I wouldn't have any other choice. Either way, the only logical choice, like there was anything really illogical about any of this, was to keep the option open. What would Shelley would have done? I looked at her frozen, laughing face. With a chance to stop the killing, save the world? There I had no doubts. I got a glass of water, tossed the beacon back, washed it down, and went to bed. One sec, I need to get up and stretch real quick. Will have to excuse me. Oh, I am not built like I used to be, and so I really do need this stretch. Oh, stretch my leggies out real good. Oh. And another thing, these jeans that I'm wearing, they have not stretched out optimally. Oh. Quite yet. So they're a little tighter than the rest of my jeans, and it's driving me bonkers. Ooh, I'm almost out of water. I'm out of water. We take those. Let's dive into chapter 11. Saint Michael, defender of man, stand with us in the day of battle. Saint Jude, giver of hope, be with us in our desperate hour. Saint Christopher, bearer of burdens, lift us when we fall. An unattributed prayer for heroes. I woke up Sunday morning knowing I had to spill everything. I was to fly out right after Mass, so after breakfast and before I drove to St. Chris, I called Julie. There's a reason why Julie has always been the ringleader of our merry band. She took it with minimal no way and shut-ups. She immediately stomped on the idea of inventing another cover story for Annabeth. She and Megan would sit her down and let her get her excitement out in private, then zip her mouth shut with blood-curdling stories of things that happened to heroes, and sometimes their friends and families whose identities were publicly known. They wouldn't have to exaggerate much, although really it was usually no big deal. Bad things had happened before. Really, really bad things. Julie made me swear to be in front of my webcam after dinner for a four-way chat fest, and that cleared my conscience for church, so I could meet the parents at St. Chris with one worry solved. But I still really needed to speak to Father Nolan. The family's practicing Catholic, but Mom is very opinionated about what Catholicism is. I've heard she broke a couple of priests before Father Nolan came to St. Christopher. To her, the church is all about good works. It's there to provide material aid and spiritual comfort, and the rest is window dressing. Nice window dressing, but window dressing. St. Chris is not a humble church. Its large basilican hall is floored with marble imported from Europe and Africa. Pale marble columns march beside the pews, and an extravagant square proscenium frames the beautifully gilded altar of the sanctuary. The trim and facings are from Florence, the stained glass windows are from Munich, and everything not gold or white is in earth tones, rich browns and reds. Mom pretty much considers St. Christopher a beautiful stage and a target-rich environment in which to hunt her natural prey, people with money and the heart for good works, or just the wish to look good, She's never been picky about why people give their money. Father Nolan likes to greet his flock at the doors before proceeding to his duties, and that morning he greeted us with a special thanks for the invitation to the gallery event. "Indeed," he said, taking my hand with a twinkle in his eye, "I shall have to see if I can find a parishioner who will donate the beautiful Kuan Yin to the church. I believe it would do good to draw the minds of our flock to the thought that piety and faith come in many forms." I flushed. "Thank you, Father. I'd love to see her every Sunday." Then I took advantage of the moment. "May I see you after Mass? I need your advice on a spiritual matter." He glanced at my parents, but his smile didn't falter. "Of course, Hope, although after my homily today I'm not sure you'll want to speak to me." The promised homily began with a humorous account of the evening at the gallery and his introduction to Kuan Yin, for which he thanked me while I squirmed. As a few parishioners shifted in their own seats, he praised the sculpture, which he called Mary of the Pagans, and went on to suggest that as love is the primary attribute of God, so a statue of a foreign goddess of love and mercy is also an image of God. He ended with the observation that when anyone, Christian or otherwise, showed love, they were also images of God. Points to the author. That does sound very much like a homily that I would hear in a church that affluent. and that's all I'll say on the matter. It always takes a while for the families of Oak Park to finish enjoying each other's company and leave, and I waited patiently as Dad got into a discussion with the renovation committee. Since his hobby is restoring old architecture, they won't leave him alone. I found Father Nolan as the crowd thinned, and he showed me to his office in the rectory. Father Nolan's office is the opposite to the rest of his church. Clean but not neat, crowded by wall-to-wall shelves of old books and filing boxes, an old office fridge, and older furniture around a battered desk. There aren't many pictures, mostly photographs of his parents and siblings, and many nieces and nephews. Father Nolan considers his office merely a place to put him in proximity with paperwork. "Did you enjoy the homily?" he asked, offering me milk and cookies. Double stuffed Oreos, his private indulgence. I accepted, laughingly. "You realize that now Dad's going to buy it for St. Chris if it's not already sold? That's so cheating." "Arguably. Father Kreisky wants new saint statues to go with the renovations. If Mother Church can adopt pagan spirits as Christian saints, patently I can do the same for a pagan image, especially one already honoring Christian faith." "Patently," I agreed, smothering a giggle. Father Kreisky, a nice enough priest dedicated to the flock of St. Chris, was one of the most straight-laced, old-style priests I'd ever met, but he met his match in Father Nolan. The little pastor of St. Chris had a whim of steel. "And now what can I do to help you, Hope?" I hesitated, then launched into a recitation of everything that had happened, leaving only the anarchist out. It took a little while, and when I finished, we sat in silence. "I am sorry for your experience, Hope," he said at last. "I agree with your decisions, although I certainly see the irony of the situation. And I'm afraid I foresee a patch of parent-child conflict in your future. Have you decided... Excuse me. Have you decided yet whether you're going to follow your father's example?" I shook my head. "Only every 5 minutes. Part of me wants to go hide in a hole, just finish my training and go reserve like Dad, but is that the best use of my gift, Father?" "I can't answer for you, only advise that you wait and pray till you're certain in your own heart. You do have time after all, but that's not what really troubles you, is it?" I... My eyes stung. "I'm scared, Father, and I really don't know if I can do this. And you're right, Dad and Mom really don't want me to, but it's exciting, too, and the things I can do are just absolutely amazing, just being able to fly." I told him about my night flight, what Atlas had showed me, how incredible it was. "And when I think of what I can do to help people, I'm glad, but how can I be?" He steepled his fingers and regarded me solemnly. "You're thinking about the Munchkin, aren't you?" I nodded with a sniff. Her name was Kimberly Austin. People died, Father. How can I be happy about anything that comes from that? That is a very good question. He offered me another cookie. I sniffed again and accepted. Chewing thoughtfully, he finished his own and sat back. Before modern medicine, he said meditatively, childbirth used to be very perilous, and many mothers died bringing their children into the world. On tragic occasions, they still do. In such circumstances, are we to regret the birth of the child? Or should we be more grateful for God's gift while mourning the loss of the mother? To be more specific to your own family's experience, your sister's death inspired your mother to start a foundation. A foundation that has collected many millions for research, aid, and education all over the world. Faith's stories helped your mother bring attention to her causes, and thousands, tens of thousands of souls have been blessed by it. The work itself brings your mother great happiness. He paused, inviting me to consider my family's history. Does being glad of the outcome mean being glad of Faith's death? He flicked his fingers dismissively. An absurdity, of course, but because we distrust ourselves, we entertain such thoughts. Your family's tragedy inspired your mother to a course of action that blesses many people. I think that circumstances being different, you would have done very well following in her footsteps. Patently, God has called you to a different work. I believe your first instincts are correct. Nor is it right for you to feel ashamed of enjoying your new gifts, though we should certainly mourn little Kimberly's death and pray for her family. He fixed me with a stern look. Do you believe she's in heaven? I nodded without hesitation. Then trust that God knows what he's doing in this matter. He smiled with sad sincerity. He's been making good come out of evil since the world began. I forgot about this. I forgot how, important this particular chapter and more broadly the importance of St. Chris Church is to the story. And it's not it's following in a proud tradition of superheroes experiencing no small volume of Catholic guilt. I mean, Daredevil's the easy example, but there are certainly more than just that. I just forgot about that. I must have glazed over. Anyway, do we have time for another chapter? We've got time for one chapter, and then that's it, I would say. So let's dive into, let's finish up with chapter 12. Look, up in the sky, it's a bird. It's a plane. No, it's Atlas? Red Robin? Armistice? Armistice? Is the president in town? Terry Reinhold, City Watch. Wait a minute. Sorry, immediately distracted before we get started here. When was Red Robin introduced to the comics? The DC, for context. Red Robin, DC. Was Red Robin a New 52 appearance? The identity was first used in the future timeline of the 1996 miniseries Kingdom Come, where Dick Grayson, instead of becoming Nightwing, becomes Red Robin. Revealed that Red Robin was not Dick Grayson, but Jason Todd, appearing under that cape and cowl. And in 2009, a new ongoing series was introduced titled Red Robin, starring Tim Drake. Tim Drake is the Red Robin that comes to mind for me. Yeah, 2009 to 2011. Only 26 issues. That's kind of surprising. But that was immediately, like, the year before this was published, so it probably was in forefront of mind if Harmon is a Batman fan. But, it's one... it's one superhero name. There's only so many. Anyway, I digress. Back on topic. Chapter 12. On Monday morning, Atlas and I walked through the dome's big doors and stepped off, lifting over the crowd with only a wave in passing. Nothing to see here, just another patrol, I thought. I tried to look cool as applause and a ripple of camera flashes followed us. Quite a few news photographers and Cape watchers had turned out in the early morning, crowded out the protesters, on the chance that Atlas's dawn patrol would also be the maiden flight of the new mystery woman. Rising together, we flew south along Lakeshore Avenue, the wind of our passage rippling our capes. Dispatch gave us our direction and time, and we cut west in a curve that took us through Chicago Midway International's airspace, waving at the planes coming in. Atlas took us close enough to an Air West jet that we could see individual passengers through the windows. One little boy waved so hard his hand must have hurt. I waved back, then we swung around and flew north again. Past the airport, dispatch maintained radio silence, and after a couple of circles and wide figure eights over the city, Atlas turned us back towards the lake. We touched down on top of the Sears Tower between the antennas. Below us, there had to be 101 small crimes and crises, but there were no major accidents, no big fires, no bank robberies in progress, at least nothing that got into the emergency channels to be handled at our level. See, this right here, calling it the Sears Tower, is how I know this was written by a Chicago native. Like, technically the Sears Tower has had 3 separate name changes. It's the Sears Tower. Like, the only people who don't call it the Sears Tower are on dispatch, because they have to call it the right name. Don't even get me started. There's like 4 or 5 buildings in my hometown that have had like corporate name changes, seemingly increasing in frequency as I've moved away from my hometown. Um, but like we all still call them the same thing. I think it's a Midwesternism, honestly, just to call a building the name that is most common for it indefinitely, rather than, whatever corporate sponsor has picked up the name. Although I guess that also kind of applies to some things. I've been other places where they're like, oh, well, it's technically called this, but we all call it that. You know what? Get up in the Discord. Uh, Give me some examples if you know anything local to you that's done that. But yeah, 2010, 2011, 2012, when this was written, the Sears Tower was, if I remember right, the Sears Tower was the Willis Tower? Maybe? I don't remember. Oh, that's been a long time. Let's look that up, actually. Local man, easily distracted. But this one's on topic. I actually do. When was the Sears Tower? Sears Tower. Yeah, the Willis Tower. It was renamed such in. When was it renamed that? No way. No way. The structure was known as the Sears Tower from its construction until the naming rights were included in a 2009 lease with the Willis Group. The local residents still refer to the building by its old name. So yeah, it was the Willis Tower in 2009, and the locals. I don't know a lot of Chicago locals, but most Chicago locals I know still call it the Sears Tower. Very vanishingly few people I know call it the Willis Tower. But author either did their research or they're a local to Chicago. Although, given like there's several now that that's been pointed out to me, there's several other like Chicagoisms in some of the codename choices and like all of uh these specific street names being called out and like calling out the L as the L rather than being like, oh, it's the train. Like there's little Chicagoisms that I'm like, wait a minute. I guess I could ask. Anyway, where were we? Sears Tower, that's where we were. The honey light of the sunrise behind us painted the city with warm colors and long shadows. A brisk wind off Lake Michigan worked its magic to clear the air, leaving the sky a jewel-like perfect blue, unblemished by clouds. In the distance, I could see a few other flyers making their own patrols. I fiddled with the earbud clipped into my mask, still uncomfortable being plugged into a dispatch system and always having someone able to whisper in my ear. There'd been no word from the fake tea time anarchist since his last threatening video file. The White House made positive sounds, but I didn't expect anything to come of it anymore. How could they catch a time traveler? How could you catch a time traveler? I mean, really, if you think about it, there's not really much way you could, barring some sort of, barring some sort of way to block, say the tachyon emitter that they're using for time travel or whatever. There's no physical cage that could hold them. Like, especially if you've separated them from their object of time travel. Like, even if you've separated them from their object of time travel, they just will eventually escape by the virtue of eventually they get out in some way and still have access to time travel. Like, that's just how fourth dimensionally it will work. You will not be able to catch a time traveler for long unless you got some kind of weird future technology that most people don't know about. It's a good point. It's like there's no point in trying, from my perspective here, and this is even knowing what I know about the Tea Time Anarchist over the broad arc of this series a little bit. Uh, there's no real point in trying to catch the guy. You just gotta kind of keep your ear to the ground and stop something if you hear about it early enough, is kind of the strat. Oh, one last time, by the way. I do indeed have several other things that are not this. Tuesday nights, we do streams that are not books. I'm hoping to pick up some Shishiko mending this coming Tuesday. So uh, if you've never heard of that, it's a Japanese style of embroidery, and I have been using the heck out of it because it's really great for high traffic areas when you're mending your clothes. There's just a couple things just the way it works. I could go into detail, but I'll save that for Tuesday. Um, and if you're not in a particular mood to show up to a stream of that, there's always the Discord where I post photos. And the Discord gets photos much, much earlier than the broader internet, if at all. Sometimes the broader internet does not see anything of certain photos that I post to the Discord. So, there is unique content there. And last but not least, I will once again remind you we are recording a podcast tonight. They are edited down versions of these live streams where I get rid of all but the most fun digressions and also most of the cat problems, which have been blessedly few this evening. Anyway, continuing on here. Giving up my fiddling, I sat on the ledge and dangled my feet over Wacker Drive. I could see the university from here, and beyond that, the temporary Ashland overpass, its new permanent framework, already rising. Even at this distance, my super-duper vision let me make out details, like the code names of the crew, stitched on the shoulders of their blue jumpsuits. Border, irons, brace, gantry. I tried to read the others as they worked. Amazing, ain't it? I looked up. Can I ask you a question? Always. Why do we patrol? What do you mean? I opened my arms wide to take in the city around us. Even with our enhanced vision, we're just too high up to catch anything happening ourselves unless we're really, really lucky. We rely on dispatch to send us where we're needed, and being out here shaves, what, maybe a couple minutes off our response time? If we're on the wrong side of the city when we get called in, it could even slow us down. Well, you're right. He studied me. Partly it's to remind the bad guys we're here, but mostly it's so the man on the street sees us. He needs to know we're here, too. You ever thought of the reason for the sentinels? For that matter, You ever thought of why we put on the capes? Kind of silly for grown-ups, don't you think? I opened my mouth and then hesitated. The answer seemed so self-evident that if he was asking it, it had to be wrong. It's not just to help people and make buckets of money? His dimple appeared as he had chuckled, but he shook his head. Yeah, we could do all that without the fancy costumes and the code names. We get to help people. Every once in a while we get to fight supervillains, but that's not our purpose. Your mother's foundation puts on art shows, sponsors performances, produces all kind of high society shindigs, but that's not what it's for, is it? He watched me while I thought about it. And no, it's not about making us super celebrities and making buckets of money. Though, he conceded, still smiling, that's certainly a perk. Our job is to be the best known face for superhumans in the country. You're saying we're not out to be famous, but we are. No, I'm saying fame's a means, not an end. You were how old? 8, 9 when when the change happened? He looked down, watching the traffic on Wabash, rather. You probably don't remember how scared folks were then. Feelings of hysteria, panic, around the whole thing. The blackout, the disasters, they didn't matter, not compared to folks like you and me doing stuff right out the comic books. Yep, folks was plenty scared. We watched a police helicopter go by, following Wabash south. Atlas shrugged when dispatch remained silent. There I was, on camera, in front of God and everybody, catching planes, pulling people out of burning buildings, even settling down a few wannabe supervillains taking advantage of the ruckus. Stitched an A on a race car driver's jumpsuit that first week, hung a cape on it. Didn't matter to anybody, and everybody knew my name, everybody even his dog. Put on a mask and made sure they called me Atlas, even though I looked damn silly. Uh, but you're saying you put on the costume because people were scared? But they knew that a flying man wearing a cape was a superhero, and they didn't have to be scared of that? He shrugged again. Sounds silly when you say it out loud, but slap a cape on a guy who can fly, suddenly he's familiar, even comforting. Well, a little less strange, at least. He smiled, remembering. Really camped it up then. Grabbed some others right at the start, sewed up some more costumes, founded the Sentinels them first couple of weeks. Now he looked down at me, serious. Your father was all over it, right beside us. Came within an ace of signing on with the team, but, well, couldn't risk his family if it all went south. I respected that, but we made TV appearances with the mayor, governor, working with the police, National Guard. Made damn sure everywhere people turned, they saw us helping. So you gave us superheroes when we needed them? He nodded. I won't go saying we single-handedly saved the country from going up in flames, but I reckon we did a lot to settle folks down. Good thing, too. Some breakthroughs out there pretty scary. One of those gets rambunctious. Normal folks as helpless as a gnat in a hailstorm. I bit my lip, thinking about it. I'd been young enough to accept it all as natural, just part of the world. But even now, nearly a decade after the event, some people didn't trust capes, just because of what they were. Any kind of power is a threat to the powerless, Atlas said, echoing my thought. Which most folk are in comparison, you think about it. So we wear the capes, we do the job. Build up a reserve of goodwill. It's needed every time some superpowered nut job does something that leaves bodies everywhere. Work damn hard to make these folks understand bad ones ain't the majority. We can keep them safe. Well, and what can I say? He grinned, dispelling the serious mood. Being a public role model, national celebrity, well, pays better than most jobs. It made sense. It was also good public relations. Mom would certainly approve, but looking up at him, I didn't think he really saw it that way. He saw my smile and looked away, stepping off into the air beside me. Time for the next lap. All right. That's a fantastic note to end on this time. So, I really appreciate everyone tuning in this fine evening. Um, Once again, this has been Wearing the Cape by Marion Harmon, most graciously provided by author permission. The allowance for us to read this. I really this gets so good. It gets really just like fantastic. It's already kind of foreshadowing some of the plot threads that are coming, and like, oh, I could talk about it for a long time, but I will horribly, horribly spoil not just this book, but the next two books in the series and one of the spin-offs if I get going. So I really need to call it there. Um, One last time. There's a Discord you can come hang out in. There is a YouTube channel where you can check out the VODs on a slight delay if you would like to catch all of this in video. If you're a podcast listener, um, you can find Paper Cuts in your favorite podcatcher. Just look for the light blue snowy background, and you'll find it. I think that's all my things to promote. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Come back next time for more Wearing the Cape, where we'll dive into chapter 13 and beyond. Uh, Thanks for tuning in, everybody. This has been Paper Cuts, and I hope it didn't.